Hey, you've got this part of the video. You've got the live unedited edition, Home Gadget Geeks, February 8th, 2018. If you're catching this any other time than 8 p.m. or 9 in the Eastern time zone, 8 Central, 9 Eastern, it just means you've got the recorded version, and that's okay. Hang tight. We're going to literally get started here in just a few minutes. If you're watching us live, and I see a few of you, Ken, other Jim, Emily out there, jump in and let me know if you can hear us. Say we are live. In the chat room, we got Dwayne with us tonight. I like calling you that.
What?
Dwayne.
What?
Dwayne's with us. Dwayne, I have a huge confession to make, but you'll have to wait till the show.
Uh-oh.
It's about you too. So,
like the band U2, or like
it's about you too.
Bono and those guys. Yeah, that's about them. They're gonna play at the meetup.
There's a meetup.
No,
I thought the meetup was dead.
No, we're trying to move it to Omaha. I was just confessing to Mike Uyghur earlier here that I'm struggling a little bit to find a location and put all the details together here. So we're trying to move it here this fall. So
Okay. Well, I like Omaha. They have good steaks.
We'll see. We do. Other Jim says he hears us. That's good.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, we have some pretty good steaks, don't we, Mike?
Yeah, very good steaks.
And the Uyghur patio is as good as advertised. I am not gonna lie. I finally made it over to the Uyghur patio. Mike's got a patio in his backyard that it's Romanesque. I mean, it's open air, it's covered, it's got a TV out there, he's got plenty of spaces to barbecue, you can do some cornhole. I mean, it is everything. It's a sweet patio.
Cornholio.
Oh yeah,
awesome.
Love it. That's what we do out there all the time: cornhole and barbecue.
Yeah, God, I can't wait to get over there in the summer.
For sure.
I do have a question for you before we get going.
Yeah.
Do you have the ability to share like your desktop?
You can.
I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you take your mouse, if you want to share something, you can take your mouse to the upper left. Then a toolbar will appear on the left side. Choose
Screen share.
The green one. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can share your screen if you want to do it that way.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering for like that JFK files thing. That is really cool. If you haven't played with it.
Nope,
okay.
I have not. I
have
not. So if you wanna,
I might actually do that. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and.
Mike, did you get into the notes?
I'm trying. My mail client's just being a bear. It's like, you haven't opened me in a week.
Yeah, it's like, thank you. And I asked you into a Microsoft product, so take your time.
Yeah, right. There we go. I got it.
Oh my God, you're killing me.
Take your time.
You're just mad because our product kicks butt.
All right.
You're like, not really, but okay.
No, it's not too bad. It's not too bad.
I actually like OneNote.
Mm-hmm.
I use the crap out of it.
We use the client. A lot of folks use the client version at work, and they just use the heck out of it. So it's pretty popular at Gallup.
See? We're popular people.
You are popular, especially you, Dwayne. You are the most popular of them all.
Oh, yeah. Now we hear it.
You are the most popular of them all.
Yeah, everybody hates me because I what was it I said that I liked Iris and everyone hated me afterwards.
That's all right. They have long forgotten about your Iris ways.
That's okay.
You're gonna make a whole bunch of friends tonight because we like half the audience loves this crypto chat, and the other half is like, don't talk about it anymore.
Well, yeah, but we'll get through that part, and then we'll also go into that cognitive services and AI stuff. Yeah, I think you guys will love that if you haven't played with it.
I have not, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. So
okay, well, I'm taking my shoes off.
No, I don't want to shortchange the crypto too much because I'm pretty.
No. I think it'll be fine. We've got plenty of crypto to talk about.
We got plenty. We could do a little post-show crypto too, where Mike's got to depart. Mike, I still am struggling with the fact that it's Hannah's birthday today and you're down here podcasting.
What?
Yeah, it's I can hear
it
the baby.
Seems like making
me feel bad.
Seems like the last time you and I were on a podcast together, it was like an anniversary or something. I mean, it was some more major event, and you were here, and we were questioning how you made that happen.
I don't know. She's a very forgiving lady.
She is. It was great seeing her the other day, by the way, too.
Yeah,
I made it out to Mike's place. It's like,
hey, look,
he lives in town. I don't know why that's such a hard thing to do.
Well, in town, we still live like 45 minutes away from each other, though.
It's true. You're completely on the other side of town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dwayne, was the June? No, you were on here in the fall. Let's see. Let me find you.
The last time I was on, I was in Redmond because I went back and showed my daughter because she didn't believe I was going to be on YouTube.
294.
she thinks it's like a celebrity thing.
January 2017. That's not it.
Actually, I am kind of celebrity-like.
Well, you are a celebrity.
Iris
updates 263. That can't be it.
No. It was
crypto.
The last one was 294.
That's what I thought, but that says January. Hold on. Crypto updates. That's me.
Actually, I may not have done one I might not have done notes for the last.
Because I'm wondering because that was the one that really started the current crypto craze of everybody. 294 was January. It's not.
Oh, you mean I came on and started a trend?
Yeah. Well, that's why I was. Let's get started the show so I can do this properly because you deserve it. So let me kick this thing off. And looks like welcome to Jim. Ken's out there. Emily and Tony. Welcome. We got some good stuff to talk about tonight. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. All right, let me do this thing. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks show number 344, recorded on February 8th, 2018. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful, actually not really, kind of cold and snowy. Mike, I think we got a storm rolling through like tonight or tomorrow, maybe a couple inches.
We had one Monday, Tuesday, now Friday. Just you can't decide what it wants to do.
No, lots of shoveling. If the storm would have run a little bit more to the south, we could have gotten 5 to 8 inches. Stayed kind of to the north. Chicago is going to get smacked tomorrow.
Yeah,
suckers in Chicago. But we'll remind everyone. Oh, and by the way, I finally made it over to Uyghur's house. Uyghur, you've got a backyard. Everything is advertised. So thank you for sharing that with me.
No, I appreciate it. You got to come back over in the warm months so we can actually enjoy it.
Yeah, no, right on. And it's just a big area. We could put like 25 guys maybe during a meetup. I'm just saying it could happen.
I'm pretty down for that.
It could happen. Maybe that was opening ceremonies, some barbecue, something like that. Of course, we post tonight because we have Dwayne on with us tonight. We're going to have some incredible show notes. I'm just going to say it right up front. You want to head out to the AverageGuy.tv/HG344. Dwayne has put together already some pretty awesome show notes. All the links to everything we talk about are out there. Hey, Dwayne, welcome. Good to have you.
Hello. It's good to be here.
No, it's good to have you. And so if you're listening now, again, we're gonna be covering a bunch of equipment pretty fast. You want to head out to the show notes, get those ready to go so you can click through them as we go. Home Gadget Geeks. No, it's not that. It's the AverageGuy.tv/HGG344. Hey, I'll remind you to get our mobile app as well, available over at Home Gadget Geeks. That's the one I wanted to say the first time. HomeGadgetGeeks.com. It's available. We thank LastPass for their sponsorship of that app. And actually, LastPass has sponsored us 3 years in a row. So thanks for all the work that they do to be able to support the app. Download it. Free to you. Great way to listen to it on the road. Go to HomeGadgetGeeks.com. We thank LastPass for their sponsorship. Last week, Paul Tian was on, and we talked a lot about Morrow Data and their cache drives. A lot of information. If you missed that one, head back 343 and get some info on that. I think kind of the future, Mike, of the home server kind of lies in something like that, a $500 box, terabyte of SSD. The rest is in the cloud, don't you think?
Totally agree. I kept thinking about it all week and just how much more sense it makes than my current setup, and I could be switching over pretty soon.
Yeah, super simple box, pretty power efficient. You're not trying to build up drives so that you can use those drives for burst. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute.
I'm gonna have to go get me one of those.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet. Morrow Data, Morro. I'll get it right this time. MorroData.com. Morrow Data. Pretty sweet boxes, and man, they are drop dead simple. I'm not gonna lie. Turn it on, attach it to your network, and there's your network drives. Pretty cool. Paul, thanks for coming on, and we appreciate it. Dwayne, good to have you back. I have I got a confession to make.
Oh.
Okay, you ready?
Okay, what did I do this time?
Okay. Well, you did do it for sure. This current crypto craze that Home Gadget Geeks and the Average Guy.tv and Reset and everybody around us is going through. I have you to thank for this because you on the last Home Gadget Geeks you were on back in the fall. You came on like twice in a row. You came on in the summer and then you came back in the fall. And you talked about how you could use 1060s to mine to do crypto and how it was cost efficient. And we went through some justification of how you can buy it and make money off nice hash and pay for it, and it would still be around for VR. Because remember, then we covered some of the VR stuff that you had.
Oh yeah, because I think if I recall correctly, that whole discussion was how to offset the cost of my VR rig.
Yep.
Which is so funny.
That was the whole conversation.
I think we even said, I'm not really doing this for profit. Oh, how times have changed.
Oh, how tables have turned. And so it is it's crazy. So that's the genesis of, like, I tried to avoid it. In fact, I'd had Edward Weniger, he's our Alpha Bitcoin vendor here in the city of Omaha. I'd had him on 2 or 3 times. And I never bit the bug with him. Mike did some investing. He had dropped some money in, hadn't bought any of the equipment. Or had you, Mike? Had you bought equipment by that point?
No, I hadn't. These two are the most expensive guests you've had on this show for me, because one made me invest money, and then Dwayne here, I went out and bought 4 graphics cards after that.
Yeah, so I bought one, and then I got them installed.
They paid off. They were great. Best purchases ever made.
It's been very good to us.
You noticed the wall of graphics cards over here.
Yes.
And I have to move the mouse because our mining is going on actively behind us here.
Yeah. So you're seeing here, and I'll put you on the main screen so folks can see you there. Yeah. So Dwayne, there's your wall of cards, and we're gonna dig in here in a second. But so the next day, that was Thursday, Friday, I bought a card, got it installed over the weekend. On Monday, I bought another one. I'm running the Asus GTX 1060s. Bought another one. Let those 2 go for a while. And then I don't know, 3-4 weeks later, I'm like, you can't just do 2. So I bought 2 more. And so I've been running 4.
It's like crack.
Oh, it is. It is total crack. We've been running, and then of course we've been talking about this. We won't spend much time talking about it tonight, but Mike and I have been running this burst coin that uses hard drive space for the plotting and for the mining as well, and we're doing some testing with it. But Dwayne, you, my friend, you are the reason that all this mining chat. So either people love you or they absolutely hate you now. So welcome to the show.
Yes, I'm telling people here, please don't hate me. And you know what? I have become hated by every one of my friends' wives. Because I'm not kidding you. Since that show, when I started, remember when I came on, Bitcoin was $2,600 a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
It was reasonable back in the.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It was reasonable,
and we were like, oh man, if we had bought it at 800, imagine that. What? And then of course, things have changed since we've talked, and then they went crazy, and then they kind of came down, and anyway, we'll get into all that, but. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
That was right before the meetup, and of course I went out to the meetup and I got McCabe to buy a card, and then he started pinging Mike and I, and of course now McCabe has gotten into he's bought a bunch of cards, and now he's been buying cards in like closeouts. Is it Amazon? Mike, have you followed that?
Yeah, liquidation.com, right? Isn't it like the Amazon?
They get them their returns or some stuff like that, and they just put them in lots, and then he's been buying them and reselling them. So he's the Levi Strauss of mining. Yeah, he's selling jeans and pickaxes. So
that's hilarious.
No,
actually, you got to wonder now if you'll make more money actually mining Bitcoin or finding cards at a good deal and reselling them on.
Well, cards are just so ridiculously expensive. Mike, I put mine on so I bought those cards for $215. They could easily sell for $300. I put them out there for $4 just to see what I'd get. I didn't get really anything this week. I dropped them to $350, and then I thought, no, I still want a way to generate some coin. So I think I'm going to leave them.
Pull them off.
Yeah, I did.
Well, And I don't think the general, so we talked about this in the post show. So anyone who listens to the regular show, not the post show,
that's
doesn't
true.
even know the whole conversation. Basically, long story short, I sold all my cards. Just I saw the prices of those cards. So I bought them all around between 200 and 250, sold all 4 of them for 350 each. So it was just insane on a card I had used and mined with. So that's kind of the backstory to that.
Sure.
So my thing was getting out now and getting the money for the cards, and switching over to Burst. And then Jim, you're going to stay in for a little bit longer.
I think so. I think
Okay.
I'm going to do both, and we're just going to continue to mine both. I think I'll do Mining Pool Hub and Awesome Miner. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, and then we'll continue to do Burst. Well, we covered a ton of that in the post show content. I remember, and by the way, a couple of you signed on for Patreon last week, and appreciate that. You get the post show content if you just $1 gets you in. It's just a way of kind of having that available to you. I said if we'd make that post show stuff always available to you if you're a Patreon subscriber. Head out to theaverageguy.tv, look for the Patreon link, or go to patreon.com/theaverageguy.tv. And I think maybe it's just The Average Guy, and get in for $1. All right, Dwayne, we want to get right to your gear because you, my friend, never do anything halfway. And so you are like, you were just starting to think about all this the last time we had this show, and then you've built out your rig since then, and it's kept your office pretty warm. What I kind of want to do is just kind of walk through your rig setup. What'd you do? Why'd you do it? Some of those things. Why don't we start with that?
Yeah. So if you recall, I started with the VR machine with like a 1070. Then the next thing you know, I decide I'm going to buy a 1060, and then I put a 1060 in a second slot and added that. Well, then I went over and started salvaging my pile of crap over here and grabbed a machine that would power an additional card, bought another 1060 and stuck it in. And back then, Jim, just to give you an idea, I bought a 1060, one of the 1060s that I'm using, for $184.
Yeah.
So price points were really good. And so I think the best thing to do is I think we start with what are the graphics cards that I have and how many do I have? So let's start with, I am now at 12 dedicated GPUs that are running constantly for this. And not only that, I've even trained my wife on how to reset the miners while I'm out of town. So people will find that to be hilarious. And I even went out and bought an Avocent IP KVM over IP switch that I'm looking at putting in so that I don't have to bother my wife. But let's start with card number 1, the card that started it all. So the card that started it all was actually this MSI card. It's a 1070. It's a Gaming X GeForce GTX 1070. And again, and a couple of people have made mention in the chat here that they're like, oh my God, he actually put links to everything. Yes, I actually gave you links to every single one of these. Now, if you actually go pay what it's being asked for on Amazon, you'll be crazy, because this card, I paid $3.99 for this card back in the day, and this, or I'm sorry, $4.99 for this card.
Which we thought in the day was pretty expensive.
Yes, this card, when I was building the show notes and I pulled this up, $850.
Yeah.
Give you an idea.
Dwayne, don't you think, and we're going to have to just keep going through because some of our gear guys will like this, but don't you think GPU, I mean, it's kind of over at this point to try and purchase. Like if you wanted to get into this on a GPU, this is why I'm recommending Burst for a lot of, like if you want to get in and do some crypto, you could still do Burst because you're not doing GPUs. But don't you think with prices now, we're kind of out of it until the prices correct and come back?
So there's a trick that I'll recommend to people on this. The way, if you want to buy GPUs right now, if you go and you sign up, you can sign up on Newegg for an alert, an in-stock alert. And what you do is sign up for the in-stock alert from them, and you'll be able to get it at a price that makes sense, because all these insane prices are people reselling and doing what some people on this podcast have done. So,
well, both Mike and I have done that. Mike was successful. I chickened out and kept my cards. But
yeah, so, and what I would tell you is the cards that I'm showing you, I would not recommend the 1070 still. 1070s, what we need is a new version of cards to go. And there, I don't know if you guys have heard, but the main reason why you're seeing this go crazy is that the card manufacturers are afraid to increase manufacturing for the demand because they're afraid that the cryptocurrency stuff will crash and then they will be left with inventory. So it's not really that they're costing more. It's that you just can't find them in stock and the only prices you see. So if you're going to get into GPU mining, you have to be patient. You need to sign up for alerts. And when it comes in stock, you better act fast and you'll be able to pick something up. But reality is if you haven't bought these at this point, your best bet is probably looking at something else in the interim until GPUs get into a better price point. But again, I think the 1060s, so what I would tell you is the ones I'm going to show you that are 1060s are really good 1060s, and I would highly recommend all of them. But I would also say that you need to go alert on these things for a reasonable price point. A reasonable price point is for these cards that I'm showing you is between 200 and 270 on these cards. If you pay more than 270, you're basically putting a kid through college. So just you're probably not getting it from a reputable place that's going to allow returns anyway. And if you get a DOA card, buyer beware.
Right.
So,
yep. Okay, keep going.
So, all right. So the card that I really started with was this one here, which is a EVGA. It's a GeForce GTX 1060. This is the 3 GB version. Keep in mind that most of the GTX cards that you want, the 1060s, I would highly recommend going with 3 GB cards. You're not going to get the money off of adding more RAM to it, even though it will be faster. You will get more, but not for the money. So it's a matter of when you're doing this stuff, and I think we talked about this before, you need to think about return on value. Like it's all about value, because if you're spending too much money on the cards, you're spending too much money on certain things, you'll never see a return, and you won't get as quick a return. So one that I found, that became one of my favorite cards is this one here. It is the EVGA GTX 1060 super clocked. This card will generally sell about $30 more than the other one I showed you. But the result is it'll do about 50 cents a day more than your other 1060 that I showed you that's the exact same thing. So it's because of the fact it's just clocked over a little bit. And if you're into tweaking the cards and stuff like that, then sure, go for it. But know that eventually once you do that, I did play with overclocking a bit. The issue I ran into is you start getting instability and overheating issues if you go into big rigs. So just be aware. If you're going to do that, I would just warn you, make sure that you have a lot of good cooling to be able to do it. The last one that I'm going to show you is this one here. This one's actually a pretty good card as well. It is the Gigabyte GeForce GTX 1060 G1 Gaming Edition. This is actually a dual fan 3 GB card. I will tell you the interesting thing about this particular card, unlike the other 1060s I'm showing you, this is an 8-pin requirement power card. So most of the 1060s I've been showing you are 6-pin, and we will talk a little bit about why you care about 6-pin versus 8-pin versus 8+6. And if you don't know what I'm talking about the power requirements and the power plug that goes on the top of the card when you plug it in, keeping in mind that you also have to have the power on your power supply to power these things, and you got to have enough ports on your power supply to do it. So when you start building your rig, I started out and I started with that VR machine, which we talked about and we covered. I'm not going to talk about that. Go back and watch the other episode for that one. What I did do is I decided to move to custom open air rigs, and what I bought is this. I've got a link in the show. I don't even want to try to butcher the name of this thing, but it basically is an eight cards across the top, and then the motherboard sits in the bottom. It can go dual power supply and all of that. You can pick these up on on Amazon. When I got them, they were about 189 bucks, and I also started adding a lot of stuff to my Christmas wish list, which ended up that a majority of my second rig was given to me for Christmas. Woo!
That's nice. That's nice.
That's just straight profit, Jim. So, so when you look at it from that perspective, the good thing about this, they make a 6-card system as well. So interestingly enough, if you look at the way these rigs are made, they'll have 8 cards at the top, but you got to have a video card in the actual motherboard. And depending on the software you're using, some software doesn't like you to use embedded video. So my recommendation is think of an 8-card open air rig will actually be a 9-card rig, and a 6-card will be a 7-card rig, if that makes sense. 6 on the top, 1 on the bottom. If you guys know Rob Dentler, for example, he got the bug as well. So he's running a 6-card rig. He's up to 4 cards. And by the way, he did that, Jim, to your point. He actually did this and built this rig about 2.5 weeks ago. But the way he went about it is he did what I said, which is he was patient about the parts, waited for when they were in stock, and he purchased the different components at a good price. So it's not impossible to build one, but you got to do it right.
That overclocked 1060 that you showed,
yes,
actually on Amazon right now is 360, which sounds bad, but it's actually fairly, I mean, if you're buying today, fairly reasonably priced. So those cards were probably, when we purchased back in the fall, Mike, that would have been a $250 card. So it's probably got $100 premium on it. But if that's the only thing you're paying a premium on today, which for the most part, like most of the prices haven't gone up on motherboards, a little bit, but not a lot. The power supplies have stayed pretty reasonable. Even the open air cases, which I'd actually build my own. I think, those are pretty easy to build. So I don't know if you need to spend. Mike, you're going to disagree with me?
No, I'm just, you still got to make sure you're doing the math and you're able to commit to, 8 months to a year until you even break even.
Yeah.
Right. And then beyond that is profit, or be open to the idea of having an exit strategy and selling. Because once you sell those cards, that helps you a lot in your break even. Because, like for me, obviously, I didn't even need to mine with these cards. I could have just bought them, held on to them, and let them gather dust and sold them and made money on the deal. But that's not the norm. These cards are not, I don't think we're going to see this craze stay around. I think they're going to go down. But you've got to have an exit strategy and be ready to admit to yourself that, okay, if I'm strictly doing this for profit, that, you need to make some decisions there. That if this is a hobby, it's a completely different story. You just got to decide before going in, is this a hobby or is this to make money?
Yeah. The reality is that it pretty much, when Jim and I talked about this, it's probably fairly low risk, even if it's a hobby, because of the fact that if you're committed into it, sure, you're committed into it, but to make it turn into break even is not hard. The way that I looked at it whenever I was doing it is I actually thought of it as a depreciating asset. And so I started looking at, okay, if I lost 50% of the value of the card over a year, how much money would the card make in a year? Take that, deduct the depreciation and the resale. So the resale was always part of it. Whereas people who are buying Bitcoin straight up with cash, these people are getting Bitcoin at full dollar amounts, and then the risk is I put cash on the table. Where what I'm doing is generating it, and if you look at back when I first started generating at $2,600, that Bitcoin's worth a whole lot more now than it was then, even after the big thing. I mean, if it falls to $6,000, I'm still doing great. So you kind of have to look at it in the math and the risk. I would say it's kind of hard to lose money at it unless you're just really, really not paying attention or don't know what you're doing. But part of the reason we're here today is to make sure you don't do that.
Right.
And like one of the things I see all the newbies do is they will buy this and they'll run like the benchmarks and they won't turn off CPU mining, and they're just sitting there burning power to get 3 cents on a CPU that makes no sense, right? I mean, CPU mining is not worth it. I mean, sure, could it be profitable on the processor that I have in my VR machine, which is this one, which is that i7X processor? this processor is stupid expensive. It'll make maybe 8 cents a day. That's you're not going to pay for that processor. You're not going to offset the cost of that processor. All you're going to do is overheat that thing and make the lifespan of it not as good. So my recommendation is stay away from processors. You know, just don't even do it. If you look in the configuration of all these different things, they all have the ability to turn off the CPU, and a lot of them have gotten now where they just go ahead and do it because it affects their profitability, and people will be like, oh, well, I'm not making as much money on this mining software as the other. So they are starting to get kind of competitive. So to kind of move past graphics cards, the other thing, Jim, so listen, you start going into open air rigs, you have to get specialty hardware. You can't just go buy like a typical VR machine game, motherboard. You have to have a specific motherboard type to be able to do it. So the ones that I currently have, this one I will highly recommend. Understand that your limitation will be 6 cards. Total.
Say the model number for us, Dwayne, so folks on
this
audio.
model is a Gigabyte H110-D3A, and the link is in the notes.
Yep.
This motherboard, the issue you'll run into is you'll put one video card on it, and then you'll have 5 slots where you can put the risers in. If you are not aware of risers, they're just these little bitty cards that slide into the slot. They have a USB cable that goes out to a card that plugs in, that you plug your video card into, and then once you do that, it locks in, and that's where how you plug in the card. You don't actually plug the video card into a motherboard. So this one, because it does have a limit. Now, there's some things that I tried with this motherboard, which is they have these things where it'll take one of those slots and make it into 4. It's not going to work, guys. That hardware is just you wasting $35. So don't do it, because I did. The problem is the motherboard has to have enough PCI Express channels, and you run out. Now, if you look at your processor has to have the proper channels. Everything I'm going to talk about, you're not going to exceed it unless you go to that crazy motherboard that has like, a ton of different, I think it had something like 20 something. This is not for you. Do not do that. Now, I'll talk about why in a bit. So this is a great motherboard for mining, very stable, which is one of the things that you'll want to do. And then the second motherboard I have, so what happened is I started with that motherboard in my open air rig, and then I realized that I had more space in my open air rig than I had availability to put cards. So then I'm going, okay, I'm running out of power. I'm running out of slots in my motherboard. So I ordered a new motherboard that would help me. And I figured I'll go on up to maximize the power supply that I had and plan to buy a second power supply for the rig. This is the other motherboard. It is a Asus, which is ASR Rock. I don't know how they say that, but
AS Rock.
And it is the H110 Pro BTC Plus. So this is a Bitcoin mining motherboard. It is what it is built to do. It has, I believe, 13 slots on it. And so if you were saying that you wanted to go and you wanted to fill out a 9-card rig, this is pretty much the only motherboard that you're going to find that's going to get you the closest to 9 cards. But you're only going to get 9 cards out of it, even though it says 13. And it has to do with the motherboard design. The slots are right next to one another so tight that when you put the video card on the main slot, you end up covering up three of them or so, and it becomes very difficult. Now,
you can use a riser on that main slot, though. So you could use a riser and just go to a graphics card just like normal.
Yes, but the problem would be is that you run out of slots in your rig. So 13, this is you're going to end up running out. If you go to 14, I think is the next logical, no, it'd be 13, would be 6, 6, and 1 on the bottom.
So you're saying it saves space up top, not necessarily that the board requires it to be directly plugged into the board.
Correct. And then the other problem is that the slots are so close to one another when you're using the risers. And I was building when I actually went to a 9-card rig. I went to a full up dual power supply 9-card rig with this motherboard, and it was the most unstable thing I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
And I'll explain why. It was because the riser cards themselves, they have like little power. They have like a metal piece where the USB piece is soldered on, and the little pieces stick out, and they'll actually touch the other USB port behind it. So what you end up with is shorting out the riser cards on it. And so when it starts doing that, the electricity jumps, or just something joggles it a bit. What you end up with is it crashing your rig. And so my recommendation on that board is that is a good stable board for 6 cards, because you're going to have to basically go every other card, every other slot, to be able to make sure that they don't touch. Now, there is a trick that I can tell you to get a little bit more compression, and that is if you take some little foam rubber like they put on the bottom of those riser cards, and you stick it on the back of this. You can't go full out, because you'll run out of space between them, because it makes too much pressure. But you could get a few here and there, as long as you skipped one between 2 of them. So it's just one of those things. Just keep in mind that what I'm thinking is happening, because if you try to find a motherboard now that can do this, you'll find that that's as hard to find. You'll actually find that those are maybe even harder to find than graphics cards right now. And the reason I think is because the motherboard manufacturers aren't doing the same thing as the graphics card manufacturers. They are actually going, oh, okay, well, we're going to make some configurations and sell them to meet the market demand. And I think they're in the process of building new form factors that take into account the risers. I highly recommend you just kind of take a look at those 2 motherboards, but don't try to go above 6 with these. There is one other AS Rock motherboard that has like something like 20 something. It might even have more than 20 connections, but then you have to start thinking about power supplies and what it takes to do that. And you start questioning whether or not it's really worth it. So, because if you have a really unstable 9-card rig, it might be more cost effective to have 2 6-card rigs, because the cost of the CPU and the RAM and stuff like that is really minimal. But I will say that you will make more the higher the compression to CPU and RAM.
Dwayne, so, I'm showing that board for those that are watching this live or watching the video, and you can see how tight those PCI slots are together. And I didn't even think about, when you start jamming those risers in, Mike, it probably matters how well those risers are made, and that if they're sloppy, if they're sloppy and they're wide, I can see what Dwayne is seeing as to how they would maybe touch each other. Which, of course,
totally. On that board, I'm looking at it now. Those are insanely close. That is not like a normal spacing for like if you're going on the back plane.
Right. And then think about how fat a graphics card is, and you look at the slot where you would plug the graphics card into it, and look at how many you would cover. And so you're going to cover the one above it and 2 below it at a minimum, and then the other one's going to be so close to the fans on it that you're kind of starting to worry about it. So again, this is one of those things that I would say it's a good motherboard, but I wouldn't recommend it over the Gigabyte. The Gigabyte is better. And then if you're trying to go 9 cards out, maybe you could solve it with some electrical tape between the risers or something thinner that doesn't conduct. But my view of it was, I already had another rig. I can't get enough graphics cards to fill this thing out. And so I ended up switching from a 9-card rig to going to a 6 and a 4 that are open air. So just be aware that those are the different things. And Jim, I don't know if you want to show what the open air rig looks like, but
before we do that, here's
that's the other one.
Yeah, here's your 19, and you can see they've already done a better job of spreading out those PCI slots, right? And then I think the magic to this one is the C, B, and A, and those are the PSUs, right? That's for your power supplies.
Yep.
And so this board actually will support 3 power supplies, because this is the problem. Sometimes if you have a board, they're only really designed to handle one power supply, and you got to do jumpers for the other ones, and it's kind of messy. This board has these 3 already built in, and they recognize each other. And so, slot A, I'll show that here. Slot A will run 1 through 5, or 1 through 7, and then slot B runs 8 through 16, and then I'm not doing the math right, but you know what I mean. Maybe too many rum and cokes at this point. So, this is an Asus board, and really, I think was designed to handle this particular scenario way better than the ASRock board you showed. And by the way, only $10 more. So this one is now, and this used to be 300. It's down to 229. So if you're going that route, I'll show that here on Amazon right now, 229. So $300 for a board, or 230 for a board. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good board.
Yeah, and so far that board's gotten pretty good reviews. The only thing you got to think of is that if you don't, you've got to make sure you match the power supply count to the number of slots. So
Correct.
There's a lot of planning. And I would tell people that one thing about building an open air rig is you need to plan for where you're going to go, because you may be better off buying power supplies in different configurations, and you need to look at those different configurations to figure out what you're going to do. And not only that, what kind of cards are you going to run? Because you would have to run something, you have to do something different if you're going to use 1070s, or you're going to use something that has a different pinout on your video cards. And I think that's, really kind of the core part of my conversation on motherboards and things. I have been asked, Jim, about CPUs. CPUs are one of the things I would tell you you don't really care. Oh, there's the case that we were talking about, which is a Vedaha professional GPU. There's a 6 card and there's an 8 card version of this. I have 2 of the 8 cards. They are big. They are really big. The 6 card one is a lot smaller than the 8, and the whole reason that Rob Dentler decided to go with this, not to go with the 8 card system versus the 6, is because it wouldn't even fit. So make sure you get the measurements on this thing before you go thinking you're going to shove it under your desk. But I will tell you also that the thing with this is that you see all those fans at the top? Those fans don't come with it. So you need to make sure that you figure out and make sure that you don't get really glowing fans, because if you put glowing fans in this, it's going to light up your room like crazy. And you want quiet fans. And I have a recommendation on that I can give you guys at some point, but I didn't put it in the show notes, but I can provide it if there's a lot of interest in that. But know that the other thing is while the fans help, if you're running a 6 card rig, or I would say if you're running 4 cards on it, Jim, don't buy the fans. You don't need them. It's just not required. So
a little air movement is nice, to be honest. So, but you can use a little tower fan. You can use a little $14 fan you get at Walgreens, right?
I just turned the ceiling fan on in the room.
Yeah,
that's enough.
Right on. But a little bit of air movement is nice.
And I think you nailed it on the head with planning too, because I think my biggest regret when I bought all this stuff was I thought, okay, I'll never go past 2 cards.
Yeah, right.
Right? And I didn't think about that at the time. So I got this super cheap motherboard that only had 4 slots on it. I got 500. No, I had to upgrade my power supply up to like 750, which still wasn't enough. So plan to have the bug bite you a little bit and have a little bit room to expand, because you're going to end up having more than you think. I think all 3 of us here ended up with far more cards than we thought, and maybe planning ahead a little bit on that could have saved us a little bit of cash. I know it would have done for me, because I wouldn't have had to upgrade my power supply and all that stuff if I would have just said, okay, I'll probably end up with 6 cards. Let's up front get the equipment that would actually run those. So I think you're totally right. Planning is key, and being aware that the bug's gonna bite you and you're gonna end up with more than you think.
Yeah, I would tell you 6 is a good planning number.
I would agree. Yeah.
So because 6 is when you start getting into things like, do I really want to go dual power supply? Do I really need a special, how special of a motherboard am I willing to go? Am I, and stuff like that. So I would definitely agree. I think 6 is your magic number. If you got a plan, then everything that you plan for 6, you just duplicate it for larger rigs. And I think that helps you out.
And that was gonna be my question to you. So I think, because I agree, I think 6. Once you go past 6, you probably, no matter what, want to go to a second rig anyway, right? I mean, you're the only one of us that has more than 6 cards. Would you agree? Like, once you get past 6, you might as well just start a second rig.
Yeah, I think I would want a 6-card rig with some expansion for maybe 1 or 2 extra cards in the case that I find an amazing deal on them and I can throw them in. But eventually you start getting to a point where you get stability issues. And so what I have right now is like I said, I have a total of 3 that's powering 12 cards. My VR rig is the most stable of everything, but that's because of the fact it's only got 2. And then the one that I've got that's running that gigabyte motherboard, that is really, really rock stable. So I would tell you these are all, I mean, you can get it really stable. And then the AS Rock one, when I went down to 6 cards, I haven't had any issues whatsoever since then. And I was having things like just like overheating issues and things like where you'd have to put a fan to blow the air against, even though it had all those fans. I have all the fans that you see in that picture, got them all running, but because it's sitting in a corner, I had to put a fan to blow the air out of the corner, because it will get hot. And when I say it will get hot, it is in my guest room with the door shut and a window cracked at 20 degrees, and it will keep that room fairly warm. So it's not the sound. Like if you get an ant miner, it sounds like a turbine going off in your house, right? But this isn't, it's not that's going to cause you a problem with GPU mining. It's not sound. It's the heat. And so, just keep in mind, it may not be comfortable to do that in your office. It won't be loud, but it might not be comfortable. So just keep that in mind. What I will tell you is very interesting about it is the fact that during the day, I just opened the door to that room, and it, like, between that, the rig in my office and the rig in my guest room, which is right across from me, that actually heats most of the bottom floor.
See? There you go.
Yeah. And the good thing is I have an air conditioning system I can put dedicated in that room come summer, and a dedicated circuit right outside the window. So these are things like you just need to think about, like, okay, the other part is in your planning is, okay, it's winter and that's great and heat's a wonderful thing then, but when it comes summer, that might not be your favorite room to be in. So just be aware. I think if you go with like 4, Jim, you're safe. 4 to 6 in a room, you're probably okay, but just be aware you're going to need a fan.
I have 4 down here, and to be honest with you, you can kind of tell, like, every once in a while they'll shut off for whatever reason, system halts or whatever, and you kind of come down, and you kind of feel like, oh, it's a little chilly down here, but it's not that much heat. I did put a big double-sized industrial fan on top of my cards that sit inside a box because it just wasn't getting enough natural movement, and that keeps both those cards at about 70 Celsius, and that's perfect, right? That's perfect. And then I've got 2 in another box, and it's not great. One's running at 85, the other one's at 68. It's the weirdest thing. Like,
I wonder what
why they run so opposite. But you do, like you're saying, you do need to kind of think through that. If you're running 2 cards in a room, chances are you're not going to have. I mean, if you're going to get into this as a hobby, and you're just going to run a couple cards, you don't need to think about it too much. They have not, especially if you take Dwayne's advice and you run 1060s, they just don't run as hot as those AMD, the versions you had, Mike, I think will crank a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And know that super clocks or overclocks will of course be hotter than the others. So just be aware of that. Yeah. So let's jump into CPUs real quick. Okay, so from a CPU perspective, what am I running? I put the 2 different CPUs in. You will see one of them is a Celeron. This is by far the most popular mining rig one. And so what ended up happening is, just like everything else mining, this processor became hard to find, and it became stupid expensive for a Celeron. So what I ended up doing in my second rig when I built it out, I started monitoring whether the Celeron versus the i3 was a better bang for the buck. And because, again, you need to think about what is resale value on this stuff and what's the depreciation. And i3 is going to sell a lot better to the average Joe than a Celeron. So the i3 is what I ended up with, the i3 7100. It looks like this, and it runs in the same motherboard. So in the end, you know, it's what you're going to end up with was an LGA 1151 socket. And one of the things is always buy it in this blue box like this, because it comes with the CPU fan, and you don't need super cooled anything. You don't need fast RAM. Matter of fact, the RAM that I put in, which is the 8 gig kit that I put here, is actually slow RAM on purpose. And believe it or not, it's becoming weird, because you need to just look and make sure that you get a good deal on the RAM as well, because everybody that's mining is doing the same thing, which is where's the cheapest RAM. So look at the CPU, like the motherboard minimums and the CPU minimums, and go for the slowest RAM. And I would recommend 8 gigs as a minimum. In any rig that you go to. If you're going to go to a 9-card rig, I might recommend you bump that to 16, because you will eventually start running out of memory. I had a little bit of that going on when I went to 9 cards and had to bump the page file on the machine to and the way that they recommend that is, I think they said, take the RAM that you have on all of your graphics cards and make that the equivalent to your virtual memory allocation. So you could start running out of hard drive space. So a lot of people will put like a 64 gig SSD in. You will have a problem if you go to 9 cards with a 64 gig SSD. I would recommend 128 or higher. The prices on this stuff is not very high. The other thing is that on a lot of these motherboards, you can put an M.2 in, and that will save you having to figure out how to mount the SSD, and not to mention the resale value is higher on those. So again, don't think about it as, hey, I should spend a lot of money. I think it's a matter of thinking about what would resell well and for your depreciation schedule, and then I would then look at what is of value. So in the case of, could you buy an i3? Yes. Could I actually mine on the i3? Again, that goes back to CPU mining is bad. Don't do it. So
hey, Dwayne, let me jump in there real quick, because Mike and I have been doing burst, and of course that's hard drive plotting. CPU not as needed for the mining process, but in the plotting it is. And so we've been telling folks, if you're going to join us on burst, we always kind of say in the long run, well, that Core i7 is kind of nice because I can plot 2 drives at a time, split those up and get some efficiencies.
This would be the bad boy you
want. that would be nice. Now, once I get moving, I don't need that. I really don't need that much power anymore. A Core i3 or whatever will get me just what I need. I have found, Mike, that on my burst box, that's a 25-watt AMD fill in the blank, whatever the cheap one was. I should memorize that number. I do max that thing out on burst on the CPU side. So it's going 100% as it's scanning the drives. It's going 100%. So I would recommend, well, maybe not the cheapest of drives if you're going to jump with us on burst. Mike, maybe next week we'll do some more detailed analysis on that when we talk about it on the show. But it is one of those, Dwayne, I think if you're building this rig and maybe you're going to mine for a while, you're going to sell the cards off later and hold on to the motherboard for whatever reason, or get that chip and you're going to hold on to it and swap it to another board. It may be worth it to get an i5 or an i7 at this point and move that to the next board, because you're going to want to keep that. So I love how you're totally. I love how you're approaching this, which is plan. Like, think through this a little bit, and don't just go for the cheapest. Don't just go for the most expensive. Go have a plan pulled together and kind of say, here's what we're trying to do with this thing. And here's some parts I may be able to use again.
You want to hear something that's really funny? Think about the fact of how much downtime for your rig is it going to take for you to install Windows updates and install upgraded graphics drivers, which, by the way, you need to do. You need to keep that stuff up to date, especially the graphics drivers, because they can improve your performance. But the installation time on that Celeron is almost double what my i3 is. And so maintenance time on it is a lot better. So to your point, and then when you talk about my VR rig, which is running that that i7X series processor, it's, I start it last because it's done before I even get the other ones. I kick all the other ones off and go do this. But speaking of which, on the timing there, Jim, could you guess how long it takes to benchmark a 9-card rig?
A while, I would imagine.
Go fix dinner. It's not go grab a beer. It's go fix dinner.
And if you don't buy all the same cards, like if you on some of these programs, you can benchmark one card, and if they're all the same cards, you can push those benchmarks down to the rest of the cards. But if you have multi-card rigs, you've got a bunch of different ones in there. You really need to benchmark every single one individually to make sure they have the best benchmarks in awesome miner or nice hash.
Yep.
To be able to do those. So yeah, a good point. I think that's a really good point. I wouldn't necessarily skimp on the processor, because that may be something you can reuse. And like you said, running updates, that's good. Taking things down. You want a fast boot. You really, I mean, time is money. So you don't want it to be too slow.
So we'll jump into the last key part that I wanted to kind of cover, which is power supply. And this why, Jim, it used to be whenever you're going to buy a computer, power supply is like an afterthought. This is where you really need to think, because this can really burn you. A lot of people are jumping onto these 1600 watt or 1000 watt power supplies, and guess what? That's what the noobs buy, or the people who need a really, really big rig. And so jumping on that to say, I just don't want to have to think about it, that's actually a bad move, because you'll probably get more power supply and more efficiency if you go dual in some cases than if you go with a single. Not to mention, if you start looking at the power supplies like 750s versus 850s, what's the real difference between them? You need to figure that out. And it's not just look at how many ports are on these different power supplies. Like, they have the what do we call that? When they have the cables.
Modular.
Yeah, modular. When you look at a modular power supply, it's not just what's on the back of the power supply, it's the cables that it comes with as well, because you need to have enough connections off of it to be able to power the different cards you want to power. So the power supply that I'm going to recommend for somebody who's looking at a 6-card rig using 1060s, primarily 6-pin, is this card right here, or this power supply right here, which is the EVGA Supernova 750P2. The reason I like this is it is not really expensive. But it is a very efficient power supply, which is also important, because power is money, and that is costing you as you run this thing. So the good thing about that power supply is that it can run 6 cards, and it can even run a couple 8-pins cards. And when we talk about this, think of it that when you plug in to a card, a lot of times they have a cable, and the cable comes out and it has an 8-pin and then it has a 6-pin. If you're using an open air rig, believe it or not, you can run 2 cards off that. You can run the first set of pins, and then you use the other cable to run to the second card. And that gives you the ability to have 2 cards powered off of 1 cable. Now, they have to be next to one another in order to do this, but the key here is that if you're doing that, you can run an 8-pin and a 6-pin off of that 1 cable. But when you start looking at, but it also ships with cables that don't have the 2. And the reason is because the cables are determining how much wattage you're drawing. So the difference between a 750 and an 850 will be how many 8-pins versus how many 6-pin cables it ships with, because you can't max it out. You can drive more power. So again, look at that and make sure you understand what are you running. The more expensive the video card, the more pins it will use, most likely. The more fans you put on the video card, the more likely it will go from 6 to 8 pins. So the example of what I showed earlier is all the EVGA cards I showed you are 6-pin cards. But the one that I showed you that was a gigabyte, that card actually runs an 8-pin connection. So if you bought 6 of them, you're not going to power it off of that power supply that I just talked about. So you'll have to figure that out. The other thing is the 1070 I showed is an 8+6. It actually requires 2 power connections, 1 8-pin and 1 6-pin. So you need to, and the way that I recommend you figuring this out is you really can't tell by saying it's a 1060 or a 1070 or whatever. That's not going to work. What you got to do is go onto Newegg or go onto Amazon and look at the pictures and make sure you get a shot of that card from the top so that you see what is the power connection for that card before you buy, because you may have just bought yourself a card that you don't have the power to run. And so that's part of the plan in your rig. And you know, it's not hard to find 6-pin cards. And so 8 pins are my exception. I'll accept them, but I also know how many 8 pins I can put on a power supply. So just, you need to know that stuff going in. So one last thing about the power supply, when you go to the second power supply, if you get a nice power supply like what I have, that power supply will come with this thing, which Jim alluded to earlier, which is a jumper. And so if your motherboard, when I first did this, Jim, I was ready to pull my hair out. I'm like, how do I make this stupid power supply come on? You know, I got 2 of them, and I'm like, you know, and I just plugged everything in. I'm like, okay, it's just going to come on, right? And no, it won't come on. So you actually have to have the power component that comes out to go to the motherboard. And this thing right here goes right on the end of that cable instead of plugging it into a motherboard. And if you could see it, which I think you can, it's got like just this one little thing where 2 pins, and what it does is it shorts that out, so that way that power supply will stay on all the time. So the other thing to keep in mind is if you do that, you might need to, if you need to do maintenance on the machine, you need to flip the switch on the back of the power supply so that you don't start messing with cards that are half on. The other thing is you need to turn that on, let it get going before you flip on the power switch on the motherboard to the second. These are the things you have to start worrying about when you start getting over 6-card rigs, or dual power supply rigs. You start getting into things like this that you really kind of have to think about. So this goes back to our recommendation. You might want to start around 6 cards and think of it there. It's a very profitable rig at 6 cards. You're not going to have an issue. In general, you're probably seeing somewhere between, and at current rates, probably somewhere between $10 to $18 a day profit on a rig like this. So just give you an idea of a 1060 rig with that many cards. So Jim, I think that's hardware.
Yeah. Let me say on those prices, like if it's February 8th and we're seeing some of the lowest prices we've seen in a while. So, you know, when you think about some of this mining, you need to take that into consideration as well. Will it always be this way? I don't know. Mike, do you think as we look at the markets ahead, if we could predict that, why would we even be podcasting? Like we would just be making money.
Millionaires.
Right? But you have to take that into account. Right now, things are not good. It played into a little bit of my consideration of like, maybe I should sell my cards right now. The prices are the highest they've ever been on those cards, and the mining is the lowest it's been in a long time. When in December, we were seeing ridiculous mining. Like, you know, I was expecting, when I bought these cards, I expected $1.25 each. That was kind of what I'd figured. And we were seeing like $3 a card in those, the high days there.
Yeah, when I hit 12 cards at one time, when I first did it, Jim, $1,400 a month.
Yeah. It's kind of ridiculous. All the prices were up, right?
Yeah.
But the market has backed up, and so just kind of take those things into consideration. Dwayne, in the remaining time that we have, I'm going to move some of the talk about some of the platforms. So as we think about Awesome Miner and NiceHash and some of those other things, we're going to move that into the post show. So for folks who normally don't, can you stay around a little extra time to talk about those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll talk about platforms in the post show. Again, that the post show is really, if you can jump on our Patreon link, $1 a month, get into the post show. We'll make that available out there and move some of that crypto conversation. I do want to get for our regular listeners who are out there every week. I want to dig into a little bit some of the stuff that you're working on when we think about. So can we make that shift?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, just to finish off the thought before we go, to complete this particular topic. Yeah. So in the high with 12 cards, because I'm asked this all the time, what did I make? I made about $1,400 a month. Okay. At the lowest point, right? At the absolute lowest point, you're talking 400. Now, where are we at right about now? I would say probably about 500 to 550 is what you're gonna result. So you figured that math out. Average rig, no. a 9-card rig, it costs you about $2,000 if you do it right. So that'll give you an idea of return, and you can kind of figure out those different things. Again, my quote on the amount of money, though, keep in mind, is 12 cards. So if you build a 6-card rig, divide it in half.
Yeah. For most beginners, I kind of recommend the 2. Most modern motherboards will support 2 cards pretty easily. You're going to have the primary slot and then a secondary slot. Some of those older boards would have had a SLI. Is that what it was called when you could chain those things together back in the old days?
Crossfire.
There it is.
And SLI. Yeah.
The back in the day when we had to do that for video cards.
All right.
So anyways, you can probably get away with 2, and that's a great place to start. But if you do 2, you're probably going to want to do 4. We're just saying that. So
if you're buying a motherboard and you're starting to buy stuff, if you've got an open slot on an existing motherboard, play.
Yeah.
And learn. But yeah.
So before we move on though, hold on. Dwayne, let me ask you this, and then Mike, I'm going to ask you the same questions. Dwayne, somebody starting from scratch today, still start? Do you think? I mean, prices are down. I mean, mining dollar prices are down, right? The coins are not what they were at one point. Now they didn't go all the way back to where they used to be, but they're still not where they are. Equipment is expensive. And so we're in that weird inversion where I think some people would say, oh, I don't know if now is the time. Dwayne, if you were going to start now, would you do the same, make the same choices?
If I was patient, I think you can do it and make money off of it. If I had an open slot on a motherboard, I would do it with no thought, right? If I have a VR rig or a machine sitting that I'm using for gaming, it's a no-brainer, right? I didn't tell you about this. I got one of the guys, like my boss, right, at work. His son had a gaming rig, and I started talking to him about what I was doing. His son's like 15. And so what his son did is set it up, and so his son's just using it to make extra cash to go to like the movies and stuff. And it's perfect for crap like that. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. So if you've got like a teenager, that you have a gaming machine and it's just sitting there, sure. I mean, it's not. I will tell you from a power perspective, because a lot of people are worried about the power cost. I'm running 12 cards, and it's not really making much of a difference in my power cost in reality. So I would just say, if your teenager's got a VR rig or something, or you've got one, don't think it's going to jack your power bill to high heavens. It's not that bad. I am kind of curious, Jim, would you agree with that? You got when you put 4 cards on, did you really notice a difference in your power bill?
A little bit, but I'm not. I also took out 2 really power inefficient. I had a fridge and a freezer that were taking up a ton of power. And so they disappeared, and I added the cards. And so I'm seeing a little bit more, but there's a little bit of trickery in there. I kind of think about 25% is what I think is kind of, and as these cards right now, as we're making less, that in the power stays the same, that means your profit's less. So you have to take that into account. Mike, what do you think? People getting into it right now, what kind of advice would you give them?
I've got to go the opposite. I got to say no. Just because, so when I do the math on this, and like Dwayne said, if you have the stuff, of course, fire it up. Like, if the electricity is the only thing you're paying for, go for it. But I'm saying if you got to spend even a penny on any of this stuff, even if you're looking at just the cards. So we'll just use what I sold my cards for, right? I sold 4 AMD RX 480s, great AMD cards for mining. Total 4 of them. So you're building a 4-card rig for $1,400. So let's say you have to go out and drop $1,400 on just the cards. Then you got like $125 power, well, probably $100 power supply, maybe cheaper depending on what you get. $75 to $100 power supply. You got a board, you got all that extra stuff. So let's just go $1,400 though. I was making $200 a month with that rig. It's going to take 7 months to pay off if everything stayed the same at that point. And I just struggled to see the coins that you can mine with GPUs at this point. All those altcoins that are going to stay GPU mining friendly. You think of the Ethereums, the ones that have really committed to not going ASIC. Then I just see that 7 months is a very long time to play with before you've even made your money back. And you got to risk that those cards could go out with mining. Mining is very intensive on these cards. And yeah, if you buy them new, you can definitely go in, you ship them in and get them replaced. And hopefully you can do that. But that is assuming you can get them at a good price in the new condition and don't have to buy them used. So right now, 7 months for me, and that's just on the cards. That's saying I have already bought in the board, the power supply, and the CPU. It's too risky for me right now. So no, I would say no.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opposite point of views. I do think it's eyes wide open if you're going in right now. It's especially like after February 8th, we were seeing the highest prices we've ever seen for video cards. It's starting to catch up in some of these areas like power supply, like memory. Boy, Dwayne, I was looking at the memory you were listing. I'm like, wow, that's a lot more expensive than I remember it being just a couple months ago, right? And so if you're going all new today, you really gotta pay attention to what you're doing. That's what I hear you saying, Dwayne.
Yeah, it's
you gotta be patient. You got to really work it now, and you got to kind of want it to be a hobby, and you got to kind of hope, I think, prices change. So
that's my asterisk too. I say no only if you're in this purely for the money. It's a ton of fun. Like if you're willing to spend any money at all on fun, like jump into it because it is a total blast. But at the same time, the other thing you got to be careful of too is if you're in this just for money and not hobby, you got to be honest with yourself. Because I found myself like, if I really added up all the money I spent and not just on the cards, like, the risers and then the cables and, I needed this and that. Like, if you were really honest with yourself and you track it, it adds up pretty fast. So it all depends on what you're in for, though. But I do say if you're looking for a very fun thing and you're willing to spend a little money on fun and have the opportunity, because if these prices go back up, we're looking at a great money-making opportunity. I mean, I made out like a bandit in my 4 months, but things have drastically changed in the last 4 months.
And I think everyone should take Mike's advice and not do this, because the fewer the miners, the easier it is for us to compute it, and the more money I make. So I'm going to change my story. I absolutely am thinking that Mike is completely correct. Sell all your stuff today, please.
There we go.
Absolutely.
Flood the market with your things. And
that was my plan. That was my plan. Get everyone out so we can start doing it. I'm trying to build a gaming rig right now, and these, I tell you, it's just
oh my God.
It has been amazing for me because now I pay attention to the blockchain. And so it's not just about coin for me, it's really about understanding the business propositions that are going on. And Dwayne, I'm sure we'll kind of use this as a transition.
I like this as a transition.
Like, I'm kind of sure that Microsoft and others are starting to pay attention to some of the business applications that could come along when we think about the blockchain. Certainly the motivations to mine or to really secure, that's a better way of saying it. If we're thinking about it in a business sense, yes, we're mining, but we're really securing the blockchain, right? Is what we're doing. We're giving it the necessary numbers it needs to be a secure platform. When we think about it in those terms, and we think about some of the stuff you're doing, maybe you can transition into that and say, what are you working on? And this mining means more than just money. It really is kind of a new future when we think about crypto.
Yeah, matter of fact, if you really go back to why did I even start doing this, sure, remember we talked about it and I said, maybe it'll help offset the VR rig, but the reality is, why would I even be thinking about it, right? It all comes down to blockchain. And so Microsoft, in case people don't know, I'm a Microsoft employee. I'm actually in the Microsoft Consulting Services, I'm the worldwide lead for connected vehicle solutions worldwide. So when there's something that's going on with an implementation around connected vehicles, then I'm involved with it at some level. So, and I know, Jim, you've known this and you've seen my world travels and the crazy things that I've had to do and places I've had to go to be able to deal with this. But I really started going, well, what is this blockchain thing? It's really starting to get big, and we're doing stuff in Azure around blockchain. And then it starts coming up in the connected vehicle space. So I can give you a perfect example, Jim, of blockchain in an automotive capacity of where it might make sense, right? Jim, did you ever remember when I had an Audi?
Yeah, I do.
Do you remember that my Audi was a diesel?
Now that I didn't get as detailed in, but keep going.
So Audi has paid me recently a very large check due to the fact that I had bought an A7 TDI, and yes, it was a Dieselgate car. And because of this whole Dieselgate thing in the automotive industry, there's this thing called the European Union. I don't know if you've heard of this thing, Jim.
small organization on the other side of the
And they get a little irritated when consumers have things like this happen. And so they start doing things like passing laws like, okay, well, maybe we don't want to let you cheat emissions things. Maybe the vehicle should send its emissions in a connected world, and we need to make sure that it's not tampered with and that we're getting the direct reading off the vehicle, and that it and so forth, right? And so when you start looking at like, okay, emissions checking and validation that it's being written and that it can't be tampered with and then communicated from an untrusted party to an untrusted party, this is exactly kind of what blockchain is. So you start looking at what it is, it really is just a ledger that is being written to. If anyone is familiar with like Active Directory is a good example of a multi, you have a database that's spread across multiple computers and things like this. In this case, you don't even need to have it within the same organization. Matter of fact, you actually don't, most times you don't even really want it. The whole purpose of it is that it's for multi-organizations or places that don't trust one another to be able to ensure that this is a trusted source without having to have a mediator. So when you start looking at the impact of blockchain into things like connected vehicles, then you're talking about that the government doesn't trust the auto manufacturer to not try to cheat stuff. So what you end up with is you end up with stuff like this, where you write it to the ledger that the emissions are passing for this vehicle, and then that's a copy of that is also given to on the government side, and it can't be tampered with by the government, and it can't be tampered with by the organization itself. And so these are things that we're starting to see where blockchain's having a huge impact. The other thing is, if you look at the cryptocurrency specifically, you really look at it that the whole concept of this is currently today everyone has a debit card. And the debit card says probably Visa or MasterCard on the bottom. The whole point of what these people do is they are the trusted mediator between the merchant and the buyer. And so you commit and you sign something that says, I promise, and then they turn around and say, and we are going to make sure that you get your money. And so that is the point of Visa and MasterCard. But when you have blockchain, you take that away because I don't need them, because both parties are writing, I commit to the transaction and I write the transaction to the ledger, and they write that they gave me something in return, and it cannot be edited. It cannot be, you don't need a mediator between the two of us. So this is kind of the concept of the whole cryptocurrency craze. And if you look at where this is really getting big, you're starting to see countries with a lot of corruption starting to move to cryptocurrency as their main currency. And that's not in the US, of course, but in other countries where you don't trust the government to inflate your money, this is a controlled inflation, and it also has a ledger to validate the transaction. It also goes into why it is really bad if you put the wrong address in and do a transaction, because when you do it, it's done. It can't be undone. And the only way to fix it is that you have to do you actually have to have a correction done within the ledger to show that you did a correction. And in cryptocurrency, once I transfer the money, it's gone. I mean, you will not get it back. There's no, I got a receipt, can I get my money back? That does not how it works. And on top of that, people will do this where they send it into a black hole, and they don't know where it went because they did something wrong. So when you do transfers, or whenever you're doing something with blockchain, the key is it will not be undone. So that's why it's very important to make sure you keep these things in mind.
Don't you think that's a problem? I mean, I do. I think we're going to have to think of a way to satisfy that for some of these things to be taken in a legitimate sense, because there are some cases, using your automotive case, if you send it off into a black hole, maybe it doesn't really matter, right? If those emissions numbers go off to nowhere, that's like, we're not losing much, right, in the sense of data. But I think if we're going to take this seriously as really, it's not great currency in a lot of ways. I mean, we say it's cryptocurrency, but it's because of those reasons, it's not great. I don't think it's a great, like, I don't think a small country in Africa that's corrupt that says, well, we're going to move to a monetary system. Well, we know from the run up on Bitcoin, it doesn't work well in those kinds of situations when it can cause. Mike and I had this big long argument about this a couple weeks ago. Hyperinflation. It can be just as inflationary. Right. So I think we need to be careful. I loved your car example. I didn't like your currency example.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that is why you see countries buying it or people buying into it in foreign countries. Right. In the US, you're looking at it in comparison to a dollar. If the currency in which you're trading for it is even more volatile than Bitcoin, if you can imagine that, right, then it's even worse, because we have certain countries in the world that the government will just decide that they will print $1 trillion in a day to pay off their debt, and that's how they handle it. And then your money in your bank just crashed like Bitcoin can crash. So what I would say is there's definitely a need for stabilization. And what you're looking for is, when will it get stabilized? And the way that you should look at Bitcoin, if you watch it as long as I've watched it, it will basically go way up, and then it will come halfway back down, and then it will hold, and then it will almost double, and it will come halfway back down. And just to give you a perfect example of this, Jim, what's Bitcoin at right now? About 8,600?
Yeah.
Okay, so where did it go? It went to 19. And so now where is it sitting? And it's been holding pretty steady between around 7,500 and 8,900 for a bit. Now, granted, people will look at that and go, that's a massive swing, right, between it. But the reality is, if you hold it for a few days, it's not really. I mean, if you're somewhat intelligent and follow the market, you can say it's high today or it's low, just like a stock. So in the end, I would not recommend that you think of it as a place to go put a retirement or anything. It's absolutely high risk. I tell everybody that puts $1 in it that every dollar you put in it, you should expect that it's going to disappear tomorrow. So if you can't afford to play this game, don't play this game. And if you're going to do it and you're going to mine and you're wanting to make it and you want to guarantee profit, then your way to do it is you cash out quickly. And so you don't let the market volatility play into it too much. Now, getting back to blockchain and connected vehicle, we're starting to see this whole trend of connected IoT things starting to really become a big deal. And you start getting into connected vehicle, and I've actually, someone asked me one day, if I could have a talk, what would I call it? And at this point, and I said I would say the cell phone is dead, right? The smartphone is dead. It's a dead man walking, just the same way as the desktop was a dead thing walking when the laptop started to get popular. The laptop, and if you think about this, it's all about what you plug into something in order for that thing to be able to do something more. Like if you go back to an iPod, you plugged an iPod into a computer to get the music on the computer, and then eventually the smartphone and the iPod kind of mixed in to become a phone, and the phone got more and more powerful, and now you start seeing that you never plug your phone in to do anything anymore to your computer. It has got enough capacity and enough power to start doing its own thing, and it doesn't need the computer to be able to do that anymore. Well, in the world of IoT, and it really started with Raspberry Pi. I don't know, there was a huge craze about Raspberry Pi, and I never really got why it was. But the reality was, it was where compute started to, at that price point, started to get enough that you could do enough compute there that you could do something interesting at a low price. And now as you're starting to see this, push into devices, and you're starting to see devices get smarter and smarter and smarter. And if you look at things like the Echo is a good example. Sorry if I just set off a ton of these things. Alexa, buy me 15 iPods. And that won't work because they won't sell Apple stuff. Anyway, so sorry, Microsoft joke.
Or play YouTube videos. They don't like Google either now on all the Amazon Fire TVs.
Oh yeah, exactly. But if you look at it, those things are becoming ambient computing. You look at smart homes and things like this. These things are getting smarter and smarter and smarter. At a certain point, they don't need you to, like in a car specifically, whether you plug your phone into your car with a cable or you plug it in with a with a virtual cable called Bluetooth, in the end, you're plugging your phone in to be able to augment the processing power and the connectivity of your phone to the vehicle. We're seeing now that the vehicles, and the bad part in vehicles is not that they don't cost a lot, it's just that the process in which they developed them, they didn't really think like they thought, like you think of a smartphone. Now that is really changing as like LTE and things like this have become more popular, and they can be well connected. And then there's actually value in the data coming out of the car, and there's also value in building experiences, and people will pay money to be able to get those experiences into the vehicle. And as the vehicle becomes more autonomous, you're starting to see, well, the experience in the car is very important to people who make cars. And they don't necessarily want CarPlay to take over the whole screen, because if I'm Toyota, for example, and I put CarPlay into a Toyota and I sell Lexus, and the only real differentiator in the car is the experience of you being in the car, and the driving dynamics go away because it's autonomous, then why will I pay the money for a Lexus if the experience is the same, because all I'm doing is plugging in CarPlay? And so this is not the goal in those spaces. They actually would view that as a competitive situation. So when you start looking at that, what you're going to start seeing is a blistering pace in the automotive industry to start doing more, because people with Teslas, as an example, love a Tesla because of the fact of what it's able to do. It's like, it's smarter, right? It has updates that are going into it. What does that sound like? It sounds like a smartphone. The car is a smartphone. It can run apps. It can get updates to apps. It could have an app store, all of these things. And then those apps, unlike a phone, which the apps are built for you as a mobile device, they can actually build an experience that's tailored to the vehicle and not just making projection of a phone screen into a vehicle. So these things are starting to really take place. And a lot of this is starting to go into AI and things like that. And it's really interesting to be at Microsoft, because everybody still thinks of us as sort of a Windows company. And while we do make Windows, I don't want to diminish Windows here, right? I think the investments, like if you look at our stock's been going crazy if you follow Microsoft. And a lot of it has to do with the fact of what's going on in the cloud. And I would tell you, I used to be an exchange architect, and now I'm working on connected vehicle, which if you go, well, what the heck is that? And everyone seems to think that what I work on is, what was it, sync. Everyone thinks I'm doing sync or putting Windows in a car. And honestly, I don't care what the operating system of the car is. That's actually the least important thing in the world of containers that you could ever imagine, right? And if you don't know much about Docker and containers, you better go read up, because this is going to impact the IT industry equivalent to what virtual machines did when VMware started. It's that big of a deal. And so, because how many people do you know are building servers and running a single operating system on a server? Every server is running some sort of virtualization, and every server is a virtual server. Eventually, there will be no virtual server. It will just be a container, and you will have something that is executing the compute, and you will put different types of containers in. So where we're starting to see is now you have all this cloud compute as well that's allowing you to do some really cool stuff. And so one of the things that I'm working a lot on lately is something called cognitive services. And I put a link in the show notes for cognitive services. And if you don't know what they are, it's basically, think of it as packaged AI that's sold. If you're not familiar with the different levels of cloud, there's like IaaS, there's SaaS, and then there's PaaS. And so IaaS is, I'm going to let you run your operating system on my hardware, and you run everything at the OS level. And SaaS is the thing like Office 365, where you have a service that you subscribe to, and that service is completely run, and as a user, you just get the service. And then PaaS is the ability for you to be able to not have to worry about anything except you just write your code and we execute it for you. And if you get into things like Azure Functions, which if you guys haven't seen that, this is really kind of the leader in what's going on in the cloud, where as a developer, I just write code and I don't care about the execution. I don't care about operating systems. I just write the code and then I pay a price for that code to get executed. And whatever the compute is, whatever the storage, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's just write code, execute code. What did it cost me to execute that on this frequency? So this is how far we're getting to the whole virtualization part. And so when you look at PaaS components and cognitive services, this is packaged up AI capability that you can just use as a developer. You pay per cycle or transaction to do it. And what does that mean? So let's go into like cognitive services and vision. So, and this will start making sense to why this is important from an automotive perspective. So one of the things that is emotion detection. So ability to take a video feed or an audio feed or things of that nature and actually determine the emotion behind the people in the vehicle. All right, so you start getting into things like this, and you even get into, okay, well, if I can tell if you're angry, happy, can I also tell if you're tired? Could I tell if you're distracted? And things like this. And I just provide you an API where you can do this by providing me a video feed. Well, now that I have LTE, I can stream the video feed and things of that nature. And then if I get to a point where that's running in a container, and you start thinking about containerization and compute becoming more and more powerful at the end, you start thinking about what could I actually kind of build out and train and then bring it down local and so forth. So when we start looking at all this, we have other things like face detection. Well, I think that would be pretty important. How many people are in the car? That might actually have some effect, right, to what you would do. You have things like computer vision, where I can train it, and I can even tell like things like how old are you. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the demos that we have. You can actually go to the Azure Cognitive Services website, and there's things that it doesn't cost you anything to play with this. You can go, and we'll even have it where you can take two different images and bring them together and say, or you can say, how old am I? And things like that, and it'll look at you and say that is a this age male and things. And so these things are becoming where you don't have to build it, and a developer doesn't have to worry about it. They just give you, here's a couple samples of what Dwayne looks like, and we train that in the cloud, and then we say, okay, here's an API, call it, and it says, yeah, that's Dwayne. Right, and so that's all the developer has to do. They don't have to, and they only pay for the process of that one transaction when they call it, and you start getting into really cool stuff. So let's go a little further. Let's go into speech. So you start getting into things like translator, active translation of, real-time translation. These are things that you're seeing in Skype, and people have talked about where we're having a conversation and it's instantly translating. Imagine you could do that as an API. You could just do this as a developer, and you don't have to know anything except how to call it. It takes care of it and gives it back to you. The same thing with speech translation. And we're even getting into speaker recognition, so that when you're talking, I can identify you via voice. Well, if you look at something like a speaker that's in your house, it's really important for maybe an app developer to write that and be able to determine who you are, and not have to require that that's being done locally, or maybe even be able to push that down to the endpoint where they want to do it. The other thing is that custom speech. Custom speech is the concept of like there's background noise and I need to filter it out. So an airport kiosk and it's really loud, I can get ambient noise and filter it. So getting to the point where you can really get into speech. And then you start combining that with the other pieces like language. And if you haven't, one of the things I think is one of the most interesting things I'm getting to work on is something called LUIS, or language understanding. It's a cognitive service. And what it does is it allows you to say something, however you want to say it, and then you can train it, and you can say the intent of that. It does an intent of what you mean. So when you look at this and you say, well, what does that really mean? Okay, so Jim, I'm going to ask you a yes/no question. Maybe you say sure. Maybe you say, go for it. Maybe you say affirmative. Maybe you say, I like that, let's do it, right? However you might say it, the result of what you're actually saying is yes, right? And so the idea of Lewis is the ability for you to actually take that and turn it into an intent so that you can code around the intent, not around what you said. And then you can update and train the model. And not only that, we see it has a training component where you can actually see what people were saying and where it didn't rank it 100%. And then you can actually take that and apply that and say, no, the intent of what they said was this. I can confirm that. And then it helps the model get better. So all of these things are starting to happen as cloud services, and being able to get these models and being able to do this stuff. And you take into things like spell check or text analytics, and things of this coming together, and you're getting to a point where you could have a conversation with the machine and not necessarily know you're having a conversation with the machine. You take that and you add in things like knowledge management. So we have this thing called a Q&A maker, which is basically you just load it up with, here are all the questions and here are all the answers. And the result is it builds the natural language engine and everything around it. And all you had to do was say, this is the question and here is the answer. And you could ask that question like, what is my tire pressure? You could say, what is the tire pressure supposed to be for my car? You could say, can you tell me more about my tires? All of this will result in the answer of what the tire pressure should be in the vehicle, because it'll automatically rank it, look at what the intent of what you're saying, and map it to the answer. And so that really becomes really interesting. And then you get into knowledge exploration. And Jim, I put a link here, and I think it might be better if you do it on your machine, is there's something called JFK files. And if you guys, I would encourage you to go play with this. It's really cool. In case people don't know, recently the US government has opened up all of the files on JFK from being they declassified it all. And in this case, if you go to this website and just type Oswald in on the top of that, Jim.
All right, hold on. Having some storage issues here. Just a second. It was taking like all of my available upload. So can you see that?
World. Yeah.
Can you guys hold on. WALD. There we go.
Yeah. There you go. Hit enter. So what they did is Microsoft team decided they wanted to show like what you could do with the power of knowledge management. So they took all this unstructured data. If you don't know what that means, it means files and all this stuff. It's not in a database. And then they went in and they said, we're going to scan all this stuff in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build a knowledge graph around it. And so when you say that you're looking for Oswald, if you notice, it actually found it in scanned in files. It's in handwriting. You actually got his picture because we know what Lee Avery Oswald looks like. And so we were able to build and detect his face and be able to bring that together. And as you scroll down through this, you can actually find all this different information. And then the things on the left give you actually a visibility into other things. And you'll even find in here where there's certain things like the floor thing is actually because that's a code name they used for him. And we know this. So therefore, that's why it shows up in your search. And so all of this stuff, you can go in and play with it. So if you're a JFK fanatic, this is a really cool thing to go play with. It's completely free, open on the internet. I gave you the link to it. And you can even go into things like, well, what is it that I want to know, just the stuff about numbers or the stuff about information. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you see the little thing that looks like a tree. When you click that, that'll actually give you a view of the inner relationships of all of the keywords so that you can see how all of these files go together. And if you want to know, like, I think there's something about Mexico somewhere, it's interesting because you can start seeing, okay, well, how does that apply to Oswald? And these are things that you can start playing around with. Yeah, you can see like Mexican at the top, and it will basically start bringing all this together for you. It's a really, really cool thing to go get an idea of what you can do. But if you take this over to a vehicle context, think about how cool this would be if we start scanning in the manual of a car. and you're trying to find something in the manual, and you could just naturally ask for what you're looking for, and it just find it in the manual, right? And so you start getting into some really cool stuff that you can start doing in this space. And then you get into things like search, where you can use like Bing, where you can look at news, you can look at web, you can look at video and images, and be able to pull all that together. And the way that you can build a model around what does Lee Harvey Oswald look like is you could do a image search against him to source the information to build the model around them. And I actually did something I won't do on here because of time and the bandwidth constraints, but I actually took and searched Jim Space on Bing, which by the way you can find, and threw it in and was doing face recognition against it to determine how old Jim was. And Jim, it said you were really old.
Oh, how old?
It's funny, depending on if I use the black and white photo that's pretty popular and prevalent for you. It said that you are like, I think 46.
Yeah, pretty close. I'll be 50 this year, so
yeah.
Not too bad.
So think about, you take all of the stuff that we just talked about in cognitive services, which will really make your head spin, and then you start getting that and you start playing that into bots, which is then you have a conversation that you can write, and you combine natural language, you combine question and answers, you combine back-end knowledge that can be pulled together from a cloud like we saw here and bring it together. And it really starts getting into a really compelling place for how you could apply that into vehicles. It also goes into anything, even a refrigerator, because of the fact like one of the little sample apps that we use to demonstrate is we can look at and train a model on what does heavy traffic look like, what does light traffic look like, and what does moderate traffic look like. Well, if you could do that and you just get the feed from all the video cameras, you train that one simple model to be able to do it, you could actually build out what is the traffic looking like just off of the video camera feeds, and you don't actually have to go look at it. And this is really kind of cool stuff. The other thing that Jim will like is we actually have a sample where we train what different weather conditions look like in the pictures. And we can tell you, is it snowy? Is it raining? Is it stormy? Is it sunny? All of those things straight off the video feeds from the cameras. And we don't actually need all the other sensors to be able to pull that back. And even though you can put additional sensors and increase the accuracy, these are the kind of things that you're really seeing happen in the computer vision and in this cognitive services and AI space. It's really, really interesting. And I gave you some links to go play with, and I encourage you to go do it. It's really amazing stuff, Jim.
Cool. I will have to check that out here after the show as we get in. I know, Mike, we actually need to let you go because it's Hannah's birthday and we've kept you way too long. So, Mike, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming out tonight.
No, yeah, I appreciate. I actually just got into that JFK files link though, so now it's okay. Well, maybe I can see, and I don't. Maybe she can wait for like 10 more minutes. And I'm trying to play around with this, but
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very, very cool stuff. All that stuff you were talking about at the end is just fascinating, and I loved at the very beginning of that connection to blockchain and how just it's a perfect use case for it in your car scenario. I thought that was really cool. And then just the connections we went all the way down, really loved it. So Dwayne, it was great talking to you. I am going to run though. I'm going to go see her for her birthday. And
yeah, you better get her a really good present for letting you do this.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think I owe her a little bit. So
yeah,
all right,
probably.
We'll see
Thanks,
you guys
Mike.
next week.
We'll see you next week. Yeah, sounds good. Well, hey, we're going to wrap up this portion. If you guys want to stay around for some post show, we're going to talk a little bit about the crypto platforms a little bit. While I've got Dwayne, we'll go through those. We'll make those available in the post show. Remember, you can get that with just $1 a month. It'll get you that ad on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/theaverageguy and just get signed up. Some of you have done that, and we appreciate you supporting us in that way. And if you want to do that, that gets you the post show. Super easy, totally unedited, by the way. I just throw whatever we do out there. So Dwayne, watch yourself. In the post show, don't forget, you can send us if you got comments, you got questions, you got ideas for shows. Dwayne, actually, we have about 6 shows in what you just went through that we should have you back on for and dig in, because I think there's some digging in that needs to be done on what you just talked about. So I'm going to do some checking. We're going to have you back a bunch of times because I think there's some really cool stuff. I want to know how to do more of this. So we'll have you back on. We'll have you back on to do that. We'll remind everyone that the AverageGuy.tv platform, both web and media hosting, powered by Maple Grove Partners, get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. For more information, visit Maple Grove Partners. You know that's Christian. MapleGrovePartners.com. And, of course, they provide both the web and audio hosting for us. You can also get Home Gadget Geeks on the on Android or iPhone app available for you. Thank LastPass for their sponsorship. And it's available out there at our site. Easy to get to, HomeGadgetGeeks.com, Android, iPhone, both. T-shirts, I didn't take them down. If you want to get, they're still out there. If you want to get Home Gadget Geeks T-shirts, go to theaverageguy.tv/shirt. And you don't have one. I should probably get one sent your way, Dwayne. Just saying.
I know. I'll wear it the next time I'm home.
I should probably do that. So available, theaverageguy.tv/shirt. We'll get you that as well. And we want to thank you guys for coming out live tonight. If you're listening to the recorded show, thanks for making it this far. I know that was a lot of information, but it's a lot of good stuff. And so we appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I always feel like there should be a gift, Dwayne, when someone makes it this far to this long of a podcast. But we appreciate that you listen to this every single week, or maybe you join us for the first time and you're like, holy crap, those guys go for a long time. Yeah, we do actually. We do about an hour and 20 every podcast, and hopefully we make your commute or whatever, walking the dog, taking a shower, maybe not that one. That's kind of creepy. Hopefully we make that better. Well, maybe not. Hopefully we make that better every week. We're live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern out here at the AverageGuy.tv live. We'll do some crypto platform talking in the post show. And with that, we'll say goodnight, everybody. All right. Yeah, no, seriously. I want to get you back on. There's a whole bunch of things in there that I'm like, oh, we should have held that for its own show, but we'll have you. I think there's some things we're
good
going to
teaser.
Yeah.
I you know what it is? I just started the new trend.
There you go.
AI is the new trend, right?
Yeah. No, there's some really cool stuff in there that we need to dig a little bit deeper. And this JFK files thing is super cool.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna love this.
Super cool. Like, I love that kind of stuff. So, and I'm not a big JFK conspiracy guy. So that in particular, but I actually and I want to talk to you. Like, I think what I do from a podcasting standpoint and the audio and the video and be like that kind of search on show notes and documents and where it's mentioned, like if you could bring Bing and all those search components and make those show notes actually like live.
So
and
what I want you to do, Jim, is I want you to open a web browser real quick, and I want you to type Azure Cognitive Services Video Indexer.
I've looked at that.
And it will do what you're talking about. You can say, go index that entire video, and you are looking for a keyword, and it will take you to the point in the video. It will give you the points and every point in that video as where that keyword was said.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
Well, but I loved that. Like, I love that page where, like, I would love, even at Gallup, for some of the stuff that we do, to be able to take all the programs that I've done, feed them in, all the show notes that we've done, feed them in, all the stuff at Gallup.com, the feed it in, and then a coach be able to come in and do some of that stuff. And it like that presentation style is dynamite, right? And say, here it's in this document. We found it here in this thing. It's in this video in this spot. Are you saying I can do that?
Yeah. Yeah, and not only that, you can make it where, like, you saw the little graph, you could like make it whether these things are interrelated and everything. Because what you do is you do the video indexer to get it indexed, right? And then what you do, and you would potentially, what you would want to do is figure out what are the different topics that you're looking for specifically to feed it in to get it indexed. But you can just index it and it'll go through and look for key topics, right? And then on the backside of that, you index your notes as well, and it will interrelate them.
Yeah.
So when you say I'm looking for the word Bitcoin, it would find everywhere where we said Bitcoin in the video, and then it would also find Bitcoin in any of our notes and put them together, just like the ASUS did whatever.
Yeah.
And it would find that as well and interrelate them.
And I tried this because it's part of my MSDN. I tried this a while back, and it didn't work as well as I wanted it to. So maybe I need to look at it again, and I'm sure it's getting improved and some of those kinds of things. But that JFK website, like that.
It's crazy, isn't it?
That stuff is cool.
And that's like a lot of scanned in images as well, which is really kind of cool. And if you think about it, okay, the thing that you were giving me crap about earlier, which was OneNote, if you handwrite in OneNote, you can still search it as free text, as text. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you've written a lot inside of OneNote, but if you do it in handwriting, you can search it as if it was text. And so this is one of the things that it's the same basic back-end technology. If you think about it, is we're just converting handwriting to text and then indexing it. And that's why it's really, really cool for you to see that. And then the interrelation. But the fact that they went as far as training the models to be able to say, go find where you've cross-referenced Lee Harvey Oswald with what they were using as his code name in the articles. It helps you as a consumer of that content to say that means Lee Harvey Oswald, and you didn't have to interrelate those. It took care of that for you. So it's crazy stuff that can be done. That's why I said AI is stupid interesting. And this is why, if you look at it from a Microsoft standpoint, this is why people are really happy with us right now, is because this is really the future of computing. Even if you have a smartphone or whatever, it's not really selling the phone that's so important. This is where they're making the money on the back end, because all the app developers that are writing apps, maybe they're not writing them on Windows, but they're writing them against our APIs, and we're ringing the cash register every time you use the app, not every time you buy the phone. So, that's the problem, is we're kind of starting to become behind the scenes a little more, but the things that we're doing are just insane. I mean, it's just really cool stuff.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. That is super cool. Also, right in the middle of all that, my storage server began to upload. It took my entire upload thing and just filled it. And I just watched everybody's video go to crap as we were doing it. And I'm like, I'm going to have to figure out, Ken, I know you're a storage guy. And when I say storage, it's STORJ. That's the, there's two blockchain-based file sharing or file storage applications. One's called Storage, or we call it StorJ, because calling it storage sounds weird. And the other one's Saya. Well, for the longest time, Saya was super active and was taking all my bandwidth. Tonight, Storage went out of control. And it's like, I'm going to have to do something different. If I'm going to use these services, I can't. I already shut off a whole bunch of stuff before the podcast. So I got to do something different.
So I have one favor to ask.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk behind me and open that door, because it's starting to get hot.
Yeah, go ahead for sure. Yeah, go ahead for sure. Get some air. One of the drawbacks to mining.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Get a little cool air in there. Isn't that funny? It's in the middle of winter, and you need to.
Well, what I can do is I have a window right here, and I open that door and open this window, and all of a sudden, it becomes nice in this room again. It's because I had the door closed. So anybody who's watching post-show stuff, just be aware it's hot because I'm in a room with 6 graphics cards running as hard as they can go, and on top of that, I've got a lot of other things in this room that are running, and I had the door closed. So this would be a bad thing to do. You only do that when you want a podcast and nobody to walk in.
Well, and I shut everything off for the podcast, so there's no.
Yeah, but I had to have my mining rig going in the back now.
It's just not good.
No, and let's see what we're actually mining right now, because it looks like it might have shifted. Yep, it's shifted, Jim.
Oh yeah.
It's not on NiceHash anymore. It's doing NeoScript on Mining Pool Hub.
Yeah, I was getting actually, I saw my first $5 a day prices since the things went to crap today on NeoScript. So
I'm at 655.
We may be recovering. Hey, let's talk a little about NiceHash with you. First of all, did you log in and sign up to get your money? How much money how much Bitcoin did you have in there when they got hacked?
Okay, so at the time, if I talk about it in dollars, let's talk about it in US dollars for a second, as more people can wrap their mind around that, and we don't have to have so many decimal points. So I would say at the time, I had about $165, $167 in when they got hacked. Now, here's the thing. I don't trust anybody to keep my money in there. And like Coinbase, I trust Coinbase because they're just an exchange. It's not, if Bitcoin goes to crap, it doesn't really affect them. It just means they're going to get more sales transactions. They're going to make money on the sell and they're going to make money on the buy. So it's like saying I would be upset with the New York Stock Exchange if a stock is going up or down. It doesn't really matter. That people are going to get paid, and so they're not volatile. But a place that's volatile or is storing my money that I don't trust would be a place like a NiceHash wallet. So at a certain point, when it came to a point where NiceHash, I had enough money in it, and my figure back then was $300, because if you recall, that was in the height of this. So $300 was roughly, I could make that in a week, easily make that in a week. So I was keeping it to it got to 300, and then I took the money out of NiceHash and moved it back over to something called BitConnect, where I would take that money and then invest it in their lending platform, and they were averaging about 1% a day return. And but there's a lot of things that happened all at one time, which is, I think a lot of people think that the Bitcoin going down was just because people were just like a Bitcoin bust. But the reality is it actually has a lot more to do with the government starting to crack down on stuff. So and then you have the fact that there's hacks that were going on. So for people who don't know, NiceHash is this thing that you can use to mine. It is a very popular platform. It got really, really popular, Jim. I mean, to the point where I think when they got hacked, that what got hacked is they got into the paying account, where all of the different wallets for people who were getting paid out were keeping their money. And what ended up happening is they took all the money, and again, it goes back to that whole black hole thing. If you leave $100 on a table and you don't watch it and it disappears, you're not going to find it. You can't go get it back. How are you going to prove that was your dollar, right? Or that was yours? Do you actually have a ledger that says that serial number was in your possession? No, you don't. It's just like cash. So in their case, they went in and stole all the cash out of it. And because this is international, it's like, oh, well, how do they really get agencies and to go after it? So to give you an idea, I think it was somewhere around $71 million of Bitcoin that was in this fund, and they lost it in a day, like in 15 minutes type of thing. And so the people and it came back to the fact that one of the techs that worked for them, its account got compromised, and they went in through that, and that's how they were able to get access to initiate a transaction from all of those out to a third-party thing. And then, of course, what do you think they did, Jim? They just started sending it to all kinds of accounts, right, all over the place. And so eventually, it's like, okay, it's basically they laundered it right as soon as they got it, so they can't figure out where it went, and there's no way to get it back. So what happened was NiceHash shut down. They shut it off. The whole thing went down. And I think you were mining during this time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And when they did this, they went down for what, about a month?
Yeah. Well, yeah, about a month.
And
some change.
And you know what, I don't know if you noticed this, but they reincorporate when they came back. There was a couple of things that they did. One is they said how they implemented two-factor auth, which they should have done from the get-go. Every other place, if you're dealing with Bitcoin at this point, you need to have two-factor authentication for logon, and I would recommend that it should also have a separate code for transactions that you need. And you need to have a smartphone that it's like that rotating pin that you need to have. And so pretty much across the board during this time frame, because there were so many hacks going on to these systems, and NiceHash was one of the big ones, you basically saw everyone move to two-factor authentication almost immediately. And And so in this case, to answer the question of what am I, did I ever go back? Yeah, I went back to them. They do have a repayment plan that they're trying to do, but you got to realize, I mean, the guys are, it's like somebody stole all the money out of your wallet. So they're trying to do their best to make it right. So I think that's commendable. I mean, that they're trying, but the reality is, you know, you kind of should have had a more secure system. But what I just got paid out just recently is they made enough that they issued a 10% payment back to me, and I did get that. I have transferred that out. Now the problem is that at 10% isn't worth anything near what it was at the time of the hack, so it's easier for them to pay back right now as well. So just be aware. I mean, as far as NiceHash is concerned, I would say that it's probably pretty darn secure now. You're not, it is going to use two-factor for everything, and in general it makes a good bit of money. Because when it went down, I know you and I talked about this, like it was almost like everybody's got all these rigs, and we all talked about, if we talked for like an hour about how much these things can cost and how much thought process went into building them, and now that thing's sitting there and it's just a toaster, right? It's not doing anything because that's what you were using to make money. Mm-hmm. And now your profits, it's gone, right? So immediately everyone scurried to trying to find where to go. Now it's funny because you ended up in a place where Rob Dentler went. But before we talk about that one, which I think was really interesting, an interesting find, it also resulted in people finding other things. So let's talk about what I found, and me and one of my big friends that got into. We got into something called MinerGate, and MinerGate is out, and it's actually not a bad thing. And it does multiple different coins. It does a lot more coins than NiceHash does. But the thing they don't do is NiceHash takes it and you mine all these different cryptocurrencies, and then they pay you out in Bitcoin. So you don't have to worry about how do I transact this coin. So MinerGate is a different thing. It is actually mining different coins, and they shift you to different coins based upon where the profitability is. The problem I ran into is their algorithm is horrible. It constantly was trying to get me to mine Monero, and Monero, I mined it for like a week and got like $80. It was awful. And meanwhile, I would have made, just to give you guys an idea, the difference is I would have made $400 in Bitcoin versus $80 in Monero, and to transfer the Monero into Bitcoin would cost me $40, and so it basically was not even really that profitable at all. So I went to this. Now what I ended up doing with it is, well, here's something that's interesting about it. They actually have software that are run on an Android phone, and you can mine on an Android phone. And now that is commendable. I love it. And every old Android phone I had in the house was running this thing just because. Why the heck not?
Could. Yeah, because you could.
Yeah,
it was under 10 hashes, right? So
it was crazy
low. It would have
low.
taken like I think a year's worth of mining on an Android phone would net you about $30.
Well, you know what's funny though? I did actually run it on an i3 just to see what it would do, because you can do processor, and a phone processor, a current one, is about equivalent to an i3. So that gives you an idea of where we are in that space.
Heat up those phones pretty serious though. Like you had to be careful because you could burn those phones up pretty fast.
Yeah, I used all the old crap phones I don't care about. So anyway, so that's notable, but the really interesting is their app actually could give you real-time information about what's going on with your miners and let you know when things were up and down and how much you were making on everything. So their reporting was really good. What I ended up doing with them, so if you decide that you're going to use MinerGate, again, it's not a bad thing, and it will make you coins. And if your goal is to make coins, it's not a bad place to go. But know that what I had to do to make it profitable or make it really worth the time is you need it to mine you something that you can exchange easily. So, because it's not just about getting coins unless you want to hold them. It's about getting coins that you can get out of. transact easily. So what I ended up doing is I forced it to mine Ethereum. And when I did that, it got to a point where it was about, I would say, 20% off of what you would get off of NiceHash, lower. But it wasn't like the, $40 versus 400. It was like, $360 versus 400. And so that, just to give you an idea, it's not bad. And if you're really a noob at it and you don't want to do NiceHash or you want Ethereum, it's a great place to go because it's super, super easy to use. It's like dead easy to use. Now, the other thing that kind of happened that crashed a lot of Bitcoin people, because if you guys go and look at what the market cap was on BitConnect was a different cryptocurrency, and what they were doing is they were converting people from Bitcoin to BitConnect Cash, and then they were allowing you to invest it in their platform. And when you invested in their platform, they started staking. And so the more volatile Bitcoin was, the more profit you would get in the day. And that really started becoming really, really interesting. And you start seeing a whole bunch of lending platforms start coming out where they were basically staking against Bitcoin. I won't try to explain staking on this, but know that in the end, you were getting 1% a day return on interest on your dollars. And it was basically like a CD. You put it in for 299 days. They would give you your capital back at the end, and they would pay you 1%. Based upon the market volatility, you would get, but if you averaged it out, it was roughly 1% a day, and they paid it back in US dollars. But to get your dollars out, you had to buy their coin, convert it to Bitcoin, and then cash it out. So in the case of this, I put about, by the time I started taking all of my Bitcoin and pushing it here, and it resulted in a situation where I had about $1,500 in it. And what happened was they got a cease and desist from the state of Texas for it because of it was basically you were earning money like you were earning money on the stock market, and they weren't getting taxes for it, for income. And then 2 weeks after that, the U.S. did to cease and desist, and they shut down the entire lending platform, and it crashed the price of their coin from $460 a coin to $4 in it. And you couldn't even get logged into the thing because it was that bad. So I still have those coins, and it is actually going back up in value now, but it was not the best situation doing that. So I think now we go into, okay, well, where am I at now? Did I go back to NiceHash after it came back? Yes, I did, because it was more profitable. As a matter of fact, not only that, NiceHash ended up getting really desperate to get miners to come back, and they were paying obscene amounts of money when they came back online. And at that time, you were still seeing, this was before the Bitcoin, what we'll call the Bitcoin crash of the turn of the year. And you ended up where you were making stupid money mining with them. But you and Rob Dentler did something interesting. You scurried to a different place than MinerGate. You scurried to something called Awesome Miner and Mining Pool Hub, which is an interesting concept. And Rob and I kept talking about this while I was on NiceHash, and he kept saying something to me. I was like, I don't understand this doesn't make sense to me. And now it completely makes sense, Jim. So he kept saying, well, you can mine NiceHash from Awesome Miner. Now, we'll talk about that. It made no sense to me what he was saying, because NiceHash, if you think about it, it's moving cryptocurrencies for you. But the other thing you got to keep in mind is the pool. It is also a pool that is doing this too. So you got these pools, and you got this thing moving you between their pools, and you're basically making money within their system. And their cash out plan is they pay you out in Bitcoin, right? So Jim, let's talk about Awesome Miner. So I think the first step is we have to say that Awesome Miner is not affiliated to a pool.
Correct.
And so therefore, it's just a piece of mining software where NiceHash and MinerGate provide you the mining software to get you to use their pool. In the case of Awesome Miner, they know of the popular pools, and they provide you an interface to be able to mine for multiple pools.
And all the miners. Yeah, no, you're right. It's just basically it's like a super miner, right? I mean, it just gives you the ability. And I always hated the complexity of all these miners. That was one of the things, I installed some early miners that, you used on your desktop, and you got to do some jankety things to get them to work. And I hated that. And Awesome Miner took away all the complexities of it. It's got 13 embedded miners in on the NVIDIA side, and you could just turn it on and put it in smart mode and just say, mine for me. And by the way, here's some pools that are available. NiceHash being one of those, but Mining Pool Hub being the one that I ended up on. There's one called Z Pool as well, and some other pools you can choose from. So it gives you some options. But yeah, you can just attach to the pool.
So I think let's get into Awesome Miner specifically for a second. So the way to think of it, and I think what we said, is it can do multiple currencies, and it can do multiple pools. And the pools are the things that have multiple currencies, and the pools have a price point for currency for you to use them. If you use your compute in there is a certain payout ratio that you're going to get per cycle, if you wanted to say, for that particular pool. So pools are competing against one another to be able to get miners to go into their pool. If you don't understand what a pool is a group of miners working together to get rewarded, to group themselves together to make them more impactful, to be able to win, I guess, the lottery of handing out. So the more work you do and the more proof of work you return, the more they will pay, the more frequently you get paid in the cryptocurrency world. And so the pool is a bunch of people doing that together to be able to get paid, and the pool breaks it out and says, based upon how much work you did and what we got paid, I'm going to take a cut and then pay everybody for it based upon their contribution. And so all these different pools are kind of fighting for miners. And so NiceHash is an example of a pool that produces their own miner so that they can increase the number of miners they have to make their pool more effective. So with Awesome Miner, you're kind of saying, okay, it's multi-pool, multi-currency within each of those pools. And that they're doing is basically helping you move back and forth between the right currency based upon the compute of exactly profile of all your cards. And it might even put multiple cards in the same machine on different things based upon profitability to ensure that you are getting paid the most that you can get paid. And the default on this sucker is 30 minutes is what I'm seeing of it. That's switching
default. Pools. Yeah. You could change that to 10 or 15 or an hour. It just depends on what you wanted to do. Sometimes switching around is not the most profitable way to do it. So, when there is a coin that's paying well, and you don't want that thing switching all the time, or the potential of it switching, you can also actually go into the settings and change exactly which hashes, or not, it's not the right word, which algorithms, which algorithms you want it to. So like if I only want it to do a certain algorithm, I only want it to mine Ethereum, I can just click that and say only do Ethereum, and that's all it'll mine.
Well, and okay, so here's the interesting thing that's starting to happen, Jim. I noticed this after NiceHash came back online and they started adding additional algorithms that I would walk in, and I have a 6-card rig sitting over here, right? A 6-card rig, to give you an idea, if you're in anything that makes sense, is somewhere between, a low level, $8 a day rate. And just to give you an idea, if I'm looking behind me right now, the 4-card rig behind me, which I'm running on, is at $7.37 a day rate, and it is mining on Mining Pool Hub and the algorithm is Equihash, which is basically like Ethereum-based stuff. And so what it's interesting though is occasionally you'll walk up to this computer and it'll be like, I'm making $2. And it'll be running some sort of algorithm, and you're looking at it and you're like, that's a weird algorithm. So what ended up happening, I'm starting to see this now, is that people who have these different algorithms, and they want to get people to, they want the miners to shift to their algorithm, will actually jack up their price point for a period of time till they get enough miners to keep it going, and then they will drop it down. So the trick to get off of that, and then once you get them mining, they're going to sit there for 30 minutes on your thing, mining at a lower cost point, because you switched your rate on me before the software switched. And so the result is, for 30 minutes, they get your compute at $2 versus $8. And so what I would tell you is, you might want to keep an eye on that and see which algorithms are doing that to you and turn them off. Because Dentler said he saw the exact same problem on one of his rigs, and he started turning off those algorithms to keep his miner from switching to those algorithms. So it's a little trick, a thing that you might want to be aware of.
Although I'd be careful. I watched some of those, and they got really good prices for that, so they would jump up and they would stay there for quite a while before they would dip down. So, you got to be in. I don't know.
If I walk in and it's sitting at $2, the best thing you can do, if you don't want to screw with the algorithms, stop and start again, and it'll jump right back up. Right. And so I have this little thing where I always walk through and just check on them to see what they're doing, make sure it's still running. But I think the other thing that was confusing for me about Awesome Miner, and it took me forever to go over, is I have 3 machines, and it looks like you would have to pay. The reality is, no, don't do that. Put the free version on, and you can run the free version on 3 different computers. It's if you wanted to run one computer that's monitoring and managing all 3. And there's really no reason to do that, in my opinion, unless you just have a ton of them. So the standard SKU is not worth any money, in my opinion, unless there's something else there that you would want. But know that Awesome Miner in general, if you use Awesome Miner, you can make more money than you will make if you just use NiceHash alone. And I think that's where we get into the Mining Pool Hub and NiceHash as a pool. And I think Mining Pool Hub, the thing that it can do is it has a ton of currencies. And you can decide with your miner, and on the pool is where you can determine what you want as the action to be done on the pool, on the work that you're doing. And so you can say, just collect all these crazy coins and everything and just keep collecting them all over the place. But then you also have to think about, how are you going to exchange them, and how are you going to transfer them to different wallets? And this can get really crazy if you're mining every type of coin possible. You might not end up with enough to meet minimum transactions to be able to actually transact these things. So one of the things Mining Pool Hub does that's really cool is you can choose what you want to be paid in. And so I've actually set it to auto convert to Ethereum now. And one of the things to keep in mind is that you might want to check what the conversions, because different currencies have different costs to convert to. And so your payout will vary depending on what you result out to in this. So, and then if you want to really understand what that's going to do to you, there's a thing called miningpoolhubstats.com. And you'll have to go in and get the API key, create an account there, and what will happen is you punch in you give it the API key, and I know this, it's just copy and paste a big long string of characters for people who don't know. And when you put that in, it will start monitoring your hub, your Mining Pool Hub account, and giving you all kinds of data analytics around it for you to see what you're actually getting, and it'll start telling you what you're going to make a day if you're using it. And you can actually configure Awesome Miner to only use Mining Pool Hub if you would like, and that way you can shift what kind of coins, how you're taking it, where you want to auto convert. But then there's another thing it does, Jim, which is if you're the kind of person that you just like, I want to set it and forget it, this is actually kind of cool, because it will automatically take your money out of the pool wallet, which is like what we said got hacked on a NiceHash, and automatically move it to the wallet of your choice, so that when it hits a certain amount. So think of it like when I hit 0.05 Ethereum, for me is the magic number, it will automatically transfer that Ethereum directly into my Coinbase account. So once I have this automated, where it auto converts to Ethereum, every time I get 0.05 Ethereum, it puts it in my Coinbase account. I can just monitor my Coinbase account and just see deposits just popping in, and they'll come in a certain basis. And however long it takes me to get to 0.05 Ethereum is how long it takes me to actually get paid. So that's the really cool thing about Mining Pool Hub. And maybe what are your thoughts on Mining Pool Hub? Because you've been on it longer than me.
Yeah, no, I think it's the way to go. And I go back and forth on, there are times when I let just the coins, I just let it mine. So when the market's going crazy and things are going up, I turn off the conversions. I'm gonna let it do its thing so I can kind of watch the coins. When we're in this down cycle, I didn't worry about it too much. I kind of just, during a down cycle, I'm gonna collect either Ethereum or Litecoin. Those are the two I've chosen. I'm kind of focusing on Ethereum and Litecoin right now, kind of building that base, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think you should call out this. Litecoin is the little coin that could.
Right.
So I know someone who put 15 grand into Litecoin just to transfer it in because it was the most stable coin on Coinbase, and he did it with a direct deposit. And it's because he won some sort of thing that gave him the money. By the time he got the money out, he was at 65 grand.
Yeah.
Because
it
because
so fast. Yeah.
I think one of the things I would warn people about those coins is look at percentages. Stop looking at the dollar figure. Look at the percentage. When Litecoin moves a cent in US dollars, it is more impactfful than Bitcoin moving $1.
Right.
And so you just need to make sure that you kind of keep that in mind. Look at percentages here, guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, so go ahead.
So it just gives me more options, right? If I want to mine individual coins and trade them myself, I can do it that way. If I want to, there may be, I watch some of these coins that are very, very inexpensive. And if their difficulty levels are down, which just means nobody's mining them, it means I can pick up a whole bunch of them. So I'm actually going to try and either buy them, or I'm going to let Awesome Miner mine them for me. So it just gives me, and then, like I said, some weeks I don't have enough time. Just turn them all into Litecoin, or turn them all into Ethereum. I don't have time to mess with this, or I don't want to mess with it. So
I'm going on a business trip. I just want it to make money while I'm gone.
Just grind, right? So it just gives you some options. And that's, for me, I'm in this to learn. So I want to, there's a Digibyte coin that's out there that's like 3 cents right now, right? And
this is the problem, boys and girls. This is the problem right here. Jim is watching. Which website are you using to determine?
I'm at the miningpoolhubstats.com.
Okay.
I live on that site.
So he's actively monitoring the difficulty of coins and what they're currently going for, and going, how many of those can I get? And this is the crack that is cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and like Digibyte has a 0% fee right now to move it. So it's like, you're like, okay, you can do something.
Let's go back all the way to when I first talked to you about this and how much you know about cryptocurrency.
Yeah. My kids sent me a meme that was like, hey, I know, what was it? Something, I know a whole bunch about cryptocurrency. Yeah, I've been in it for 2 weeks. Like, one of those kinds of things. Yeah, no, it's been good. I mean, all these tools are really, really helpful to kind of make some informed decisions about, what you're doing. I had a portfolio of $1,500 at the height, and it's probably worth $700 now. Yeah. And all mined. I've put very little in, as far as actual US dollars. But it's been it's just good to kind of watch things roll around and move around. And, we gotten involved in these 2 storage coins, and we're looking at a third, and again, hey, if they make any money, great. But I'm more interested in what we talked about with who's going to be the leader. Like, this is super early. Like, I think we're still in the pre-show. Like,
yeah.
there are so many things that do nothing, and there are so many possibilities of what we could do.
Well, if you really get into like Bitcoin, you start getting into, is it really going to be able to handle the transaction load? It's not. And so what's happening, and that's the reason you're seeing these forks in them, is to be able to accelerate and make them more performant. Like Ethereum Classic is actually really Ethereum, and they rebranded it and they forked it, and then you ended up with Ethereum, which is a faster version of Ethereum, the original Ethereum. So when I think let's move toward NiceHash. Okay, so if you're using Awesome Miner and you take NiceHash, and let's take the miner piece of NiceHash away, and you just say, I want to think of NiceHash as a pool, not as a miner, which is an interesting concept. I didn't understand why you would do this before, Jim, and now I understand why. So currently, the way that I've set it up for dual pool. And the reason is because the two pools will fight each other on who will pay you more to mine Equihash, for example. So will be mining the exact same algorithm, and they will pay you differently based upon that between the pools, because it's not just this is the price, right? It's what am I willing to pay to have you mine this for me? So when you look at those, why did I do it that way? So what I have is NiceHash comes out in Bitcoin, right? So it comes straight out. Well, one of the features when NiceHash came back, they partnered with Coinbase. And they have it where if you are a Coinbase wallet holder, that's your in and out to US dollars, by the way, for most people. That's the exchange. And a lot of people use this as their primary wallet because you have the ability to get that wallet, do transactions from iOS, from Android, from a web page. It's just literally the go-to. And when they add a currency to their exchange, it basically solidifies that as a real valid currency. It's almost like when Apple enters the industry, it makes it where, okay, this is actually something that becomes real, right, in the consumer electronics space. So with NiceHash, they in their agreement with Coinbase, with me being a Coinbase wallet holder, and that's where I'm basically headed, zero transaction fee, instant transfer. So they have made it where you can do it, and you don't have to have a ton of Bitcoin in your wallet to transfer it. I'm talking like you can do it on about $20 worth of Bitcoin, which if you don't know much about Bitcoin, then that's not a lot of Bitcoin. So, and why the heck are you listening to us right now? So so the reality is that what I'm doing is I said, okay, I really want Ethereum, and I don't care if it's Ethereum or if it's Bitcoin. It all goes back to Coinbase. So if they're willing to do the conversions and transfer it back in, I can do it equivalently in both. And if NiceHash is actually paying more money for me for my compute, there is no transaction fee for conversion to Bitcoin, and there is no transaction fee to convert it over to my wallet, which in Mining Pool Hub, there is a transaction fee to send it back to Coinbase. Now, I'm not saying it's massive, but it's still a percentage. So, and you know, but this is why you might actually add NiceHash there, but know that you need a NiceHash wallet to be able to do this. So if you mine NiceHash, you need to go to NiceHash and get their wallet, and that needs to be your destination address for NiceHash, because otherwise it takes forever for them to pay you out. If you use their wallet as the mining wallet, then what you end up with is every night they will pay out, depending on if you've hit the minimum, which the minimum is really low. So again, these are things that I kind of learned over time. So right now I'm testing this because Dentler was only Mining Pool Hub, and he and I are comparing.
That's where I'm at. I have not been. So I'd be interested in hearing what you're finding.
Yeah, right now
don't worry about that monitor, Dwayne.
Yeah, well, I'm keeping an eye on it.
I know it's cool, but
so no, it's actually not where it normally is. So, but the thing I would say is just, from that perspective, what I can tell you in the short period I've been doing it, which is roughly about 48 hours,
which is a lifetime in crypto.
It seems like it is making a little more to do it that way. Now, the problem is I need it to all come back and get all the fees to find out which one. And it'll actually be interesting because which one actually is paying out more, the pool hub, and where does it mine more? Right now, it seems to be mining pretty steadily, switching back and forth. It's on mining pool hub right now, but at the beginning of the podcast, it was on NiceHash. But both times it was doing Equihash, which is interesting. So anyway, I think that kind of closes out our whole miner discussions, and everything. So hopefully this was, fairly informative. I feel like there's people that would just eat this stuff like it's gravy.
Well, there's two sides. There's those that just love it, and there's those that really hate it. And that's why we've actually moved most of our crypto conversation into the post show, because people know, like I've told them, hey, we're moving most of our crypto. When Mike and I talk about it, we're moving a lot of that crypto conversation into the post show, just so folks. But I felt it was really, really important to bring you back full circle, because you started this whole thing.
Am I the end?
And now you're the end. No. There's plenty more. There's plenty more where that came from. But no, I think it was a good update. We're a ton of time in, so I'm actually going to let our live folks go. Many of them are dropping off. But Dwayne, thanks stay around for a few minutes. I'll chat.
Yeah. We can chat
on the end. But yeah, no, a lot of good info, and you basically covered exactly what we all went through over the last 2 months. I mean, because we got hot and heavy into it early November. Things ramped up in December, was incredible. And then January, the bottom fell out. And I think we're seeing a nice little recovery here in February. I think we're going to...
You know what? I love it because it needed to thin the herd.
Yeah. And I'm making, well, they just dropped under $3, but I was making 3 something here on Equihash.
Are you on? You have 4 cards?
2 each. So this is
okay.
I'm making right now. So I measure between the two. So
I'm
making about $6 with those 4 cards right now.
Yeah, I'm doing 633 right now on 4 cards.
Yeah. So it's about right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm about the same with those 1060s. So, but I'm interested. I might switch.
Oh, did you release the guys?
Not yet. I may switch. I may do it because I can do a pretty nice test where I can have one machine run on NiceHash and one. Here's the deal. I've been real hesitant to go back to Bitcoin. I am not a fan of where I think Bitcoin is going. I think it's going to be the MySpace of cryptocurrency. I think we're only going to see it slide. And so I don't have a lot of it now. It will be a long, slow death because it's the backbone of cryptocurrency right now.
Well, you got to think it's the Kleenex
but Facebook or MySpace was big too, and they went away. So it's one of these things where, and it's just the backbone. Like everything is based, but we're starting to see a lot more of these exchanges do things with Ethereum as well. So it's like Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? We're starting to see more of that kind of happening.
Have you heard of CryptoKitties?
No.
You have not. You have to go research this. I actually went through the process of getting 2 CryptoKitties and breeding them.
Oh, no, I think I have heard of this. Yes. Yeah. No, I'm not going to get involved.
I just had to do it because it was funny.
Yeah. No, so, right on.
I have a CryptoKitty for sale for anybody with Ethereum.
Yeah. No, I have heard of that. But so I am hesitant to use NiceHash just because I don't want Bitcoin. But there would be some advantage to mining out, if it's going to be more profitable, mining it out over to Coinbase and then just exchanging it in Coinbase for Ethereum, because
just take it out to dollars. Why would you put it in Ethereum?
I know there's too much that I don't ever want this money to ever enter the US market. I want it to always stay in crypto.
You're one of those. Then you need to look at BitPay. BitPay is the concept of a debit card that uses US dollars and comes out of your crypto wallet.
Well, but Dwayne, I'm not, I mean, I'm to the point now. I don't know if I want to spend this at this point. Like I made some
I agree.
mistakes early where I spent this money and I shouldn't have. Like I'd have done so much better if I'd have just held it. And so I'm just trying to get it places where it's secure, you know, and I think Coinbase is one of those. So Coinbase is my Bitcoin wallet. It's my Ethereum wallet. It's going to be my Litecoin wallet. Everything's going to be there, right?
I think NiceHash is, I believe for them to continue to stay competitive, I believe they're going to have to offer you what you want to be paid in.
Yeah.
And Ethereum will be the second thing they'll offer. You know it.
Right.
Between, I believe that you've got, and now we're getting into some crazy speculation here, guys. Bitcoin Cash is really more sense than Bitcoin long term. And the other thing is that the question is going to be, is the Bitcoin brand and Bitcoin Cash going to overtake Ethereum, or is Litecoin going to become the thing that people move to because they're tired of dealing with this crap? So, but we haven't, I don't know the performance back end for Litecoin, but I believe it is Ethereum based. So if that's the case, then it'll probably just be Ethereum. So but I definitely agree with you. Bitcoin is a thing that might have a slow death, but it doesn't matter if you move it. But the problem you're going to get into is going to be, you realize that Coinbase will not go currency to currency.
You mean?
You have to convert it into the US dollars wallet, which they'll charge you a fee for, and then charge you another fee to convert it into Ethereum.
Oh.
So yeah, these are things you have to watch. And I guess listeners at home, if we're still being recorded, is make sure you keep up with every time you convert and every time you move money, they charge a fee.
Well, and it's a taxable event as well. You know?
Yeah.
Remember those taxes things?
Yeah. Well,
that's even worse.
Well, you know that Coinbase actually got hit, that any transaction, so the U.S. government hit them up, any transaction over $20,000, they now have to report to the IRS. And so if you're doing transactions and you don't, anything over 20 grand, you're going to end up paying taxes on that, boys and girls. So just be aware.
Well, what I'd probably do, Dwayne, now thinking about it, because I didn't think through. I thought I could exchange those coin for coin at Coinbase, but that's okay. I will probably consolidate Bitcoin at Coinbase and it'll be there. Then when I want to buy an altcoin, a Ripple or whatever, I will probably end up moving that to an exchange and then exchanging it for altcoin at that point.
Yeah. What are you using to exchange coin to go from Bitcoin to other currencies?
Bitcoin. Oh, depends on what I'm buying. So like Binance, if I wanted to buy some Ripple, so I bought it at Binance. I've been using Polynex. That's actually where most of my Saya coin was for a while. I've since moved all of that off. Oh yeah, Dwayne, trust me. There's a whole.
You're like the altcoin king.
There's not really. There's really about 6 that I've really been watching. Right?
Okay, so what is the most rogue coin that Jim Carlson owns today?
The most rogue. That's probably that Digibyte coin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aragon is mine.
Is it? Yeah. There's all right. I told the live folks we let them go. Thanks for coming out, guys. Have a good evening, Emily. Sorry to interrupt your editing out there. She's always editing while she's listening to the show, and so she stays around, but I know she's not listening. So thanks, guys. Have a good night.